Hello, let me know where you're from in the world and what time it is after liking this video. There's a death row inmate who we've executed over a dozen times. He won't stay dead. We killed Joseph Glass for the first time on August 18th, 1999. I knew he was a strange case since day one. Never seen a guy so happy to die before. It was like we were doing him a favor. He refused the automatic appeal. He refused to be seen by a chaplain. He just wanted it over with. It had only taken a little over a year, and it was already time for him to make his appointment with God. He freaked me out just passing by his cell. He was like our very own Hannibal Lecter, the way he just stood there in the back of his cell like he'd been waiting for you. The lights always burned out in any cell he was in, and maintenance had gotten tired of fixing them. Not that he seemed to mind in the slightest. The darkness seemed to swallow his top half, and all I could see were the whites of his beady little eyes poking out of all that black. Billy drummed his baton against the bars. "Up and at 'em, cowpoke," he called in that mocking tone. "Time finally come for you to pay what you owe, you sick son of a—" Billy. Warden Taft silenced him with a word. "If you can't act like a professional, you're going to have to sit this one out." Billy paused and licked his chapped lips. "Nah," he muttered. "This a show I can't miss." Glass seemed to tick Billy off more than any prisoner before him. He liked him to at least pretend to feel sorry for what they've done, or act scared of what's coming to him. This one didn't even have the common decency to shed a tear. He was as stone-faced as a statue, even while being marched to the chair. Billy liked to joke sometimes that we ought to take the guy out back with some car batteries and really put the fear of God into him, get him to cut out that stoic act. I think he was only half joking. After what this guy did to those girls. Well, Billy has a daughter, so I guess it struck a chord. We all watched him fry. The warden, his closest men, the thin-faced man representing the commissioner of corrections, the prison physician, the families of those poor girls. It couldn't have gone more by the book. Only oddity I'd noticed at the time was that the stench of death never quite left the clothes I'd worn that day. And then the next morning, we came into work to see the whites of those beady little eyes staring at us from the darkness again. "Good morning, sirs," he said, just as he did every morning in that airy, hoarse little voice. I'll admit it. I dropped everything I was carrying, stumbled back, stammered like a confused child. Hell, I almost screamed. You're not... You're supposed to be..." "I don't know what you mean, sir." He leaned in like he was trying to stare a hole through my chest. His tone almost sounded disappointed. "You never came for me. You promised me that yesterday would be the end, sir, but you never came. I waited all night long. Why did you lie to me?" Me and Taft looked at each other. We both had the exact same question on our minds. If Glass was still alive, who the hell did we roll into the morgue last night? "Jesus Christ," Taft gagged when he pulled back the cadaver cover, stumbling away. "It's Billy." I looked. I know I shouldn't have, but I couldn't help it. And I'll be forever haunted by the sight of my friend lying there on his back, mouth agape and cloudy eyes staring into the ceiling, open wide as if he'd spent his last moments in a state of terror. The public never found out what happened. The cover-up story was that poor Billy had been taken by cardiac arrest. Internally, it was the scandal to end all scandals. Worst case of incompetence and negligence in history, they called it. They brought the hammer down on anyone even tangentially involved. Me and Taft were out on our ears, and they would have prosecuted us too, but that would have required admitting it ever happened. But I just could never wrap my head around it. Of those dozens of witnesses, not a single person noticed we were strapping a guard to the chair, not an inmate. It was impossible to the point of absurdity. Glass had been the man in that chair. I'd never been more certain of anything in my life. Some months later, I noticed power flickering off all over the city one evening. It was brief, so I thought nothing of it, at least until I got a call from a familiar number the very next morning. "I understand you were one of the staff who regularly worked with one Joseph Glass. We would like to consult with you about an evolving situation." "Oh." "At 7 p.m. yesterday, we attempted the execution of Joseph Glass for the second time." There was a long pause, And when the voice returned, the professionalism had melted away, replaced with a baffled anxiety. And well, it, uh, it didn't work. I blinked. It didn't... What? There came a long sigh. Perhaps it'd be best if you saw for yourself. And just like that, me and Taft had our jobs back. Officially, Joseph Glass had been successfully executed on August 18, 1999. Unofficially, they'd tried again 6 months later, just to tie up loose ends. This time, he hadn't even had the courtesy to pretend to die. He just sat there on the chair, motionless and unaffected, while the CO who'd flipped the switch suddenly seized up and began to convulse, screaming and gnashing and wailing as electricity seared him beneath his skin, clawing at his chest until his eyes popped in his skull and rolled down his face like melted candle wax. All around him, lights flickering, machines bursting from pressure, electrical panels vomiting arcs of static. It was a mess. The feds were crawling all over this case now from a department I've never heard of. Something about investigating preternatural activity. They told me Glass was refusing to speak with anybody but the COs who'd once cared for him. Being walked into that interrogation room almost made me feel like I, myself, was a convict being marched to his execution. Glass was staring at me when I walked in, like he'd been sat there motionless, waiting for me. I expected nothing less. I took a shuddering breath as I sat across from him. I'd sat across from serial killers and psychos before and showed no hint of fear, but how could I not now sitting across from a man who can kill people without touching them? Glass. Officer Mendez. His tone betrayed no emotion. I had thought you'd abandoned me. I winced. Number no, Glass. I'd just been temporarily relieved. It's good to see you again. Would you like a glass of water? I offered it to him. He didn't even look at it. His eyes just bored into mine, relentless. I'm here to ask you a few questions. Silence. Okay, Glass, I need to know how you killed Billy and Kramer. I didn't, he replied. It did. It? The thing standing behind you. I didn't bother to turn around. I had enough experience with prisoners trying to trick me into looking the other way while they pulled off some half-baked escape plan. Glass, please, let's take this seriously, I replied. I've always treated you with respect, haven't I? You've never had any problems with me. Actually, I do. I have a problem with all of you. Oh? You here all believe that death is a punishment. There was the first hint of emotion I'd ever heard in his voice. It's not. It's freedom. The only freedom. You promised me that gift. You promised me you'd let me die. You've given it to so many other prisoners while leaving me behind. With all of your machines and your science and your knowledge, surely you can find a way, if anyone. My throat felt suddenly dry. I had to take a sip of the water myself and hoped it would quell my burning nerves. We're trying our best, Glass, but you have to work with us. It may help if you told us what exactly is preventing us from executing you. He moved for the first time, leaning in so slow as to be almost imperceptible. It won't let me die. And that's when I felt a hand settle on my shoulder from behind. Everything stopped. My lungs stopped inflating. I swear my heart stopped beating, and my blood froze in place in my veins, and it all felt so cold. I could see the hand in the corner of my eyes, long and veiny and black. I could feel the breath on the back of my neck. I'd once mocked the way deers froze in headlights. Now I understood. I couldn't move, I couldn't blink, I couldn't think, I couldn't even take a single breath. Even as my lungs began to cry out for air, and my vision blurred, and my thoughts melded together. All I could see was Joseph's eyes staring into mine. Those infinite fathoms of darkness, that Stygian sea that swirled and stormed and thundered in the blackness of his iris, and the eyes of things waiting a million leagues below the waters. And I would have suffocated there, too terrified to even breathe, if those agents in black had not called off the interrogation then, and come storming into the room. Later they showed me the tapes from the security camera, There'd been nothing behind me, nothing placing its thin hand upon my shoulder, nothing at all. On May 7th, 2001, Glass was set to be executed for the third time, via hanging, or so I heard, in some government black site somewhere, far from prying eyes. While it was set to happen, me and Taft were sharing glasses of scotch in his office, nominally to celebrate. Really, because we were scared. Taft always struck me as young at heart despite his years, but this was the first time the warden had ever looked truly, properly old. He watched the yard below as he had a drink. "Did I ever tell you why I chose this line of work, Mendez?" I shook my head, and he sighed. Back in '63, they found a woman's body in the back seat of a burnt-out car in some state park near my neighborhood. A prostitute. One of her Johns had chopped her up, burned all the evidence. And you know what got me, Mendez? Nobody cared. Nobody bothered to investigate. Who will notice one less hooker on the corner of Fifth Avenue, right? It didn't sit right with me. The way I see it, Mendez, every life matters. Even the ones we try and cast aside. Everybody's got people who love them, and childhood memories, and all that. Everybody deserves justice, no matter who they were. He set down his glass and looked me in the eyes. So I joined the force, got the case reopened, found the guy, and I watched him fry. And I like to imagine she was there watching too as he burned. There was a tense moment, and then a chuckle. Of course, after that bullet to the hip in '71, I couldn't walk the beat anymore. But I've been just as happy here, watching justice be served. It makes me feel like there's some kind of karmic order to the world. Good deeds and bad deeds get repaid in kind. It was clear there was something lurking beneath his words, some unspoken thesis. Eventually, with old, wrinkled, tired eyes, he said it. "I've thought about it, and if Glass doesn't die tonight, I'm finally going to retire, Mendez," he confessed. "After what he did to those girls, what kind of order can there be in a world where a monster like that is just beyond justice?" I was shocked. Warden Taft always struck me as an unmoving fixture. What would we do without him? "He'll die, sir," I promised. "It'll work this time, it has to." But he seemed deeply uncertain. With one last shuddering drink, he leaned forward. His eyes. He stared at my expression, as if desperate for me to understand, for me to know. Those things in his eyes, haven't you seen them? And at that moment, Taft was yanked up out of his chair. It was so sudden, so inexplicable, I could barely register what I was witnessing. Some unseen force lifted him 2 or 3 feet above the ground, dangling him there. He choked, coughed, and sputtered, desperate to gasp down air which would not come, and clawed at something around his neck which I could not see. He was hanging, I realized, and with wide, horrified eyes, the same as Billy's had been, he silently begged me for help. I sprang from my chair and wrapped my arms around his dangling legs. At first I tried to pull him down to the floor, but I realized it was only tightening the invisible noose around his neck. Then I tried lifting him as high as I could, which gave him some relief, but not much. Tears rolled down his face as it swelled and turned blue. And even though I could not see the noose, I could see the bruised purple skin where it had squeezed around his neck. All the while, I screamed myself hoarse. "Help! Somebody, please! Jesus Christ, we need help in here!" But nobody came. And all of a sudden, some unseen force seemed to sweep my feet out from under me. I dropped like a bag of bricks, but I was so startled I maintained my grip around the warden's legs. I fell and yanked him down with me, and his body suddenly jolted with a sickening crack. It took me a while to manage the courage to look up at him. His neck had been stretched far too long, and his head was bent to the side at almost a 90-degree angle. Eyes wide, round, and bloated tongue hanging from dry lips. And then whatever force had suspended him disappeared, and his body fell upon me while I screamed and screamed. I came bursting from his office to find my co-workers casually chatting and working just outside. Somehow, despite all my screaming and begging while Taft was dying, none of them had heard a thing. I took a page from Taft. I wanted out. We were dealing with something unholy here, something whose tendrils could reach any distance, and my life, who knows, maybe even my soul, was at hazard. But the agents in the sharp suits made one thing clear. If I refused to cooperate, well, I would make the perfect scapegoat for the murder of Warden Taft. I was marched into the interrogation room to find a Joseph Glass that had abandoned all pretense of humanity. His eyes had darkened to a pure black, or perhaps he had no eyes at all, only windows into some place of outer darkness. I was shaking like a leaf as I sat in front of him, feeling more like a prisoner than he was. Mr. Glass. No reply. I shuddered, trying to focus on my little piece of paper to distract myself from the blackness of his eyes. I have some questions I'm supposed to ask you. Is that okay? Silence. I take a deep breath. How old are you, Glass? I thought it was just one of those basic questions. Conversation starters, really. I couldn't have prepared myself for his answer. I am old, child. His voice was nothing like I remembered. It was deep and low and rumbling, like there were multiple people speaking in unison, and all were equally ancient. Older than you could possibly know. Older than this nation, and older even than the empire that once bore it. I had to fight the basic animal instinct to flee. Focus on the questions, I thought. Why did you do what you did to those girls? Just so I could feel something again, he whispered. Anything. Did you not feel the slightest bit of guilt? Remorse? You ask that of me? Me who has watched empires rise and fall. He almost sounded amused. Does time feel remorse? For time has killed far more than I. But mankind is like the Hydra. All I've killed will be replaced by, essentially, identical stock, and in greater numbers. And then they will die and be replaced. And so the cycle will continue forever. Did you expect me to pity them for being given the death I myself covet? Only the dead are given leave of the cycle. It is a blessing. And suddenly, he stood from his chair, as if he'd never been restrained at all. A blessing you promised me, Officer Mendez. I stared up at him in disbelief. How did you... But I couldn't even stammer a sentence out before he was upon me, crawling over the table with the eerie grace of a spider. These were no longer the imperceptible hints of emotions I'd come to expect. It was like a switch had been flipped. Tears streamed down his cheeks, snarling with genuine rage, hurt, betrayal. And beneath those black seas in his eyes, all the things that haunted the fathoms below were rising to the surface. You owe me a death. Make good on your word. Pay your debt. I cried out and recoiled from his every touch with disgust, but he was stronger than he looked. I couldn't worm my way out of his impossible grip. I won't. Get off of me, you sick bastard. Do it. Pay me what you owe. It was like 1,000 different voices screaming in my ear. Straining and weeping, I locked my hands around his neck and pressed my thumbs against his throat, trying to strangle him. But instead, I could just feel that grip upon my own neck, squeezing the life out of myself as my lungs burned for air. Yet I kept pressing harder and harder, as if hoping I might somehow break through whatever unholy force was protecting him. And then those terrible hands grasped my shoulders again, and I was paralyzed by a terror that could be called nothing but ancient and primal. Like the thing standing behind me was the same force that had kept my ancestors huddled terrified in their caves 100,000 years ago, and every one of those voices was crying out to me through my very blood, and it pulled me from my chair, threw me as though I were weightless, and the next thing I knew, I was waking up in the infirmary. Once more, none of this was captured on the security camera. In the footage, I just enter the room and have a seat with strange, almost robotic movements. And then the both us just sit there, staring at each other without speaking, without moving, without blinking, for an hour. After this, Joseph Glass entered a catatonic state, and from then on refused to converse with even me. Now that my usefulness had ended, the agents discarded me like yesterday's trash. Don't even seem to care if I tell anybody. Who would believe me? I thought I'd gotten lucky, that my nightmare was over. I couldn't have been more wrong. Go sorting through any public records and you won't find a single mention of the name Joseph Glass. They've squirreled him away in that off-the-books black site and scrubbed away every other trace of him. I'd say he'd been unpersoned, if indeed he could ever be called a person at all. But they're still trying every execution method in the book. I don't know quite why. Maybe it's for research. I'm sure the US military would love to find the secret to making its men as unkillable as Glass. And besides, they're not the ones who have to deal with the consequences. On June 3rd, 2005, they tried a firing squad. I know this because me and my wife were out on our second honeymoon, slow dancing by the lake at night to our favorite song, when I felt a wetness against my chest. I looked down to see her eyes as gray and dull as foggy glass, and her chest shredded to Swiss cheese by rounds that made no sound. On December 23rd, 2012, they tried lethal injection. That was the day they found my son's car wrapped around a tree, and baffled coroners discovered that he was dead before the accident even occurred, his bloodstream polluted with pavilon and potassium chloride. It's been years since I've isolated myself from everyone I knew, hermiting away in this cabin out in the middle of nowhere. And yet the stench of death still follows me. Just a couple years ago, I found a news report mentioning my nephew. Apparently, he'd been found completely exsanguinated, his veins emptied utterly despite no signs of a struggle. God knows what kind of arcane methods of execution they're trying by now. He's not going to let me walk away from this. Not while I still owe him a debt. But I've been doing some research too. Research into those untold legions of things I witnessed staring up from that blackened sea in Glass's eyes. I've learned things men were not meant to know. Practiced rites, assembled tools, ingredients. And I think I know where they're keeping him. Even though they blindfolded me, I counted the second between every turn on our way to the black site, and I've since spent weeks watching the place, cataloging every entry point. Maybe I'm slipping into madness, or maybe I've truly found the way to put an end to the horror, to finally give this monster the justice that Taft would have wanted for him. Joseph Glass had been right about one single thing. I have to pay what I owe, even if it kills me. Eat my heart. I wish I could give a more romantic starting point, but I just don't have one. I didn't do bad in school. No Einstein, but I got by and kept my head down. I kept that up after getting into college, pursuing a major in English. Dealing with kids seemed like a nightmare, but teaching was something I thought I enjoyed. From the few times my friends asked for help with essays and explanations of one of the 1,000 poems we were expected to learn. I didn't have a mom at home, but I wasn't under any circumstances abandoned. My dad filled up both roles, tried his absolute hardest, and I'll always love my dad. He was a baker but got promoted over time and runs his own bakery. His bakery is how I met Scott. I was helping out with moving the pretzels from the storage room in the back to the front. Partially because of the pretzels being bought, mostly because of me stealing them and eating them. When he first came in, I took one glance, looked back at the pretzels, looked back at him, and saw him looking at me, and walked back to the storage room still holding a whole bag full of pretzels. My dad gave me the worst side eye I've received to date and gave me an all-knowing smirk stating, "I know you're trying to hide it, but I can see you blushing." From there, I only remember jumps in moments. From him becoming a regular, to asking to hang out. From friends to best friends. I wish the feelings went away for some pathetic reason. I wish I could have stayed his friend because I know how much easier it is to be forgiven when love isn't in the equation. I tried for so long to not think about him, but I couldn't. He was the foundation keeping my head up, and he was the only thing in my mind. I loved the way he fixed his middle part in the wind. I loved the way he laughed and how clean his teeth looked. I loved the way he smelled and how his hands looked. I loved the way he talked, the way he wouldn't let people be rude without reason but would try understanding every side. Every time I looked into his eyes, I saw a heavy heart with a soft inside, and I wanted it all to myself. Every other boy and girl that looked his way ignited a hatred in me, like some unforgiven sin they've committed in my eyes. And I do not forgive. I do not forget. By day the feelings were sweet and quiet. By night they turned loud and violent. Thoughts of him looking at me and telling me that he isn't comfortable around me, Thoughts of him seeing me the way I saw myself. I don't know what I was more scared of. Him saying he'll never love me, or him saying he loves me too. Then from those to worse. How I'd react if he died. How I'd hurt and hate myself. What I'd do if he fell in love with somebody else. He wasn't ever mine, but I wanted it more than I wanted anything else in this world. We stayed friends for 2 whole years until I ruined everything. One cold November night, I had came over to his house in just a t-shirt again. I was doing that quite a lot, actually. If he suspected anything, he never had the heart to say anything. I just loved wearing his clothes, his smell, his dead skin particles against mine, something that belonged to him covering me and keeping me warm. I belonged to him. He wasn't mine, but I was his. We had this obsession over Fight Club. Where he enjoyed the psychological aspects, I just loved Brad Pitt and Norton. There wasn't anything special about the night. I just got drunk and made a mistake. Something came up in the movie, some scene where the two are making soap. He said we should try. I don't know what I was thinking, but I crawled over to him and kissed him. He didn't say anything, but his body language said enough. The dead motion, the stillness, the mix of shock and horror in his eyes. I sobered up quickly after that. I stood up and left, still wearing his hoodie. I don't know if he looked at me on the way out. I didn't turn around. I didn't deserve to know. We didn't text again for a very long time. I cried in his hoodie till the color drained out of it, till the color drained out of my eyes. My dyed hair, my painted nails. I cried till I couldn't cry anymore. I'd like to say I got over him, but it would be a lie. I kept on with life, but the ambition I had died off. Being an English teacher turned into working full-time at my dad's. The personality I had liked about myself slowly dwindled and shrank until I wasn't that person anymore. The memory of that person was in the pictures of me and Scott I had saved as my lock screen. Scott's clothes I hadn't thrown out. I didn't turn to drinking or drugs or anything drastic. I just got on. Life felt dull, and I knew there was no point of destroying myself. My dad deserved better. Yesterday marked 2 years of me and Scott not talking. I helped my dad cook some cinnamon buns, which I was more than happy to do. Cinnamon was a new favorite snack I had enjoyed. He said to go take a break since the shop didn't need extra hands until around 1 p.m. to where people would usually pop in for their breaks. We owned a building with 3 floors and had the bottom floor dedicated as a bakery, and the other 2 were our living quarters. So I went upstairs and made a cup of tea in our staff room, which was really just our living room and kitchen. I turned on the TV and looked for something to watch for the 30 minutes I had, but couldn't find anything appealing. I turned off the TV, took a long sip from my cup of tea, and checked my phone. Scott had messaged me. Hey, classic. I tried to hold back the urge to write a paragraph back. I kept writing words and deleting them and writing and deleting. Scott sent another message before I responded. I assumed you'd text SMTN a little sooner, but I got bored of waiting. Guilt bit down into me. I could have written something. I should have. The love I held never fully dissipated. It couldn't. Dating just felt like I was cheating on him. Sex just felt empty. Nothing could ever break what I felt, but that night hit me in a way I could never recover from. What apology could ever possibly be enough? I wrote back. My fingers were typing, but I wasn't writing in a collected, intelligent way. My body was typing for me. Why now? He responded almost instantly. It almost made me smile at how fast he had typed a response back. I feel like I led you on. I kinda always had a guess you were gay, but I just didn't think that you would. You know. My heart was unbearably loud. My right leg was bouncing. My teeth were quivering. I didn't know what to say. There's no words that could fully express how I felt, how wrong he was. I wanted to tell him that it wasn't his fault. I wanted to apologize and say a million things. I settled on humor. My fault falling in love with somebody who dips chicken into maple syrup. After I pressed send, I got terrified. What if he didn't find it funny? What if his humor changed? What if this and that and this and that? He responded with a shitty gif of a crying, laughing emoji with the caption ROFL. Nobody said that anymore or used that gif. He's such a loser. Low blow coming from somebody who drinks Bloody Marys. Jokes became catching up became talking, and talking turned serious quicker than I was comfortable with. He wouldn't bring up anything recent that happened in his life, only asking about me and trying to expand things as much as he could. From spiked seltzer to bottles of painkillers, nothing had gotten exciting. I never got addicted, but talking to him made me realize I'm technically sober from drinking, since I hadn't drank in over a year. Then almost out of nowhere, after him laughing about my cinnamon obsession, I mentioned I wasn't actively trying to be sober, just hadn't had anyone to drink with. He responded with a message I really missed seeing. "Want to come over? I've got some Coke and some Smirnoff." Within a minute of reading the message, I asked my dad to skip work. After a heavy apology and a promise to do all the cleaning myself when I returned, I left towards the apartment Scott said he was staying in. I knew it was just friends as we could ever be, but my heart was racing. I was wearing the gray hoodie I had taken on the night I kissed him. I held my phone like a baby and kept checking down to make sure the message was real and that I hadn't misread it. It hadn't snowed, but all the local nature was covered in frost. It was still bright, but due to November, it would be pitch black in a matter of 3 to 4 hours. The sun wasn't visible. The glow gleamed through the clouds and shined onto all of the town beneath. Rain was drizzling down with an apparent high risk of heavy rain, but at the time I thought my weather app was over-exaggerating. If I waited 20 minutes, I could have had the bus bring me over, but it was only a 15-minute run, and I wasn't patient to wait any longer than I had to. When I got to the block, my first thought was how horrible the building looked. On Google Maps, it looked like a relatively clean, gray-painted building. Ruins of some kind of apartment block begging for revival or a deep cleaning. The building looked all wrong, in every sense of the word. The graffiti was everywhere, but none of it was coherent. Odd sentences that made no sense, strange drawings and strange glyphs. The concrete had some kind of outer coat that was peeling off. What wasn't falling apart was covered in vines. It stood out heavy in comparison to the two brightly painted yellow apartments on its left and right side. I went up looking for a buzzer but couldn't find a keypad or any way to contact a tenant. I had been behind on my phone bills and have not been prioritizing keeping my data paid, so I had no way to contact him. Half expecting it not to work, I pushed the graffiti-stained glass door. To my surprise, it opened. Dust and ancient cobwebs blew off the doors. Cold air blew out, as if the block had its own wind within it. I walked in and smelled heroin needles and crying women. Some kind of place tainted in heavy memories and violence. This couldn't have been right. I turned back and began to walk outside, but was greeted with heavy rain. I could have left. I was raised here. I'm adjusted to rain. Nothing was truly stopping me, but I knew this was the right place. I went onto Google Maps and traced each road and followed to the gray apartment sandwiched between two colorful ones back home. I was too confident to go home. I turned on my phone planning to see if I can still access maps without Wi-Fi, but got greeted with the last message from Scott. A new one had appeared. "I love you." I glanced over it and saw it, but didn't fully process it at the moment. I checked back down and read each word letter. Bye. Letter. My heart ignited, and I dropped my phone in a panic. It hit the concrete hard, and I saw pieces of glass shatter and bounce away. I crouched down and picked up my phone. It went from a small crack to a huge one. Half my screen was a neon green, and the bottom half a neon pink with white sectioned lines like cuts. Only the middle was visible, only the last text he had sent me. I knew he didn't. I got scared. What if he was doing something awful to himself? What if he just wanted to text his old friend goodbye? What if this was his goodbye? My mind snapped in a panic. What room was he in? I couldn't check my phone, and I couldn't check each room in this block. Think, conversation. Laughing about eating habits, inviting me over, telling me the address. BTW, I'm in room 14, it's on the top floor, but don't take the elevator, it's on its last leg. 14. I shoved my phone into my pocket and went towards the stairs. The building didn't have any of its natural light, so I used the broken screen of my phone to light the way. There was a yellow stained rug on the floor of the stairs that followed me all the way up. each step squishing some kind of unknown fluid into the fabric of my runners. I wasn't paying attention to smaller details, but I could imagine maggots on the floor crawling to the decaying, rotting body of Scott. Dying alone next to the phone waiting for me, I sped up. His name was stuck in my throat between panting breaths. I let him out, screaming and pleading and begging, but I got up to the last floor. I stopped for a second to pant and then looked up at where his door was. My heart sank into my guts. His door was covered in some kind of green moving vines, some form of green tendrils moving, swirling, almost breathing. The ends were caressing where the number of his door was. 14. I charged into the apartment and tried breaking through the door but failed to break it down. The tendrils reacted and shrunk, tightening against the door. I followed the tendrils with my eyes and realized they led into the room. No, they were coming from the room. "Scott?" I whimpered. "Scott, what the fuck is this? Are you okay?" The tendrils remained unchanged. I took 4 steps back, counting each one, and charged back into the door, slamming against it with my shoulders. I took more steps and rammed over and over and over and over and over and over and over until the wood reached a breaking point, and I ended up crashing right through the door into the apartment. I coughed. My lungs and shoulders felt like they were burning. I luckily didn't get any splinters or land on anything sharp. In fact, my landing was weirdly soft. I put my hands under me and pushed myself up to see the apartment. It was overgrown, writhing green vines shifting and moving lively, covering each possible surface of the floors and the walls. Some areas led into masses of contorted greenery, which had gorgeous red mushrooms growing out of them. The only light illuminating the room was a scarce yellow coming from the right to where I assumed the bathroom to be. I walked forward trying to avoid the vines and went into the bathroom. There wasn't any of the bathroom left. From the floors and ceiling to the doorway and walls, everything was covered. Not an inch of tiles or plaster was visible. Pulsating, swirling, shifting and breathing vines moved across each other like snakes fighting over any ounce of color that wasn't green. The living tendrils swirled and I picked a single one and followed it from its end all the way over to where I realized all the vines were coming from a huge cluster of them in a particular shape. A bathtub. I wanted to run and scream and cry more than anything, but I couldn't. Something overtook me. I looked down to my feet and saw one of the ends of the vines had wrapped themselves around my foot. It wasn't a strong sensation like it was forced. It was warm, inviting. I took a step forward and the vine let go, moving under my foot and making space onto the floor for me to move without hurting the vines. The moment I got close to the tub, the vines shifted and moved and opened up a viewing window so I could see the contents hidden within. I collapsed onto the floor beside and grabbed onto the vines. They held me back. He wasn't groaning. He didn't have that much left in him. His skin was plastic, faded, yellow, shining. It looked wrong. Vines contracting and shifting around his exposed ribcage. He only had one organ left. No lungs, no liver, no stomach, no intestine. Just a massive bloated heart. It was shining orange with a bleak white hue at the bottom. It was beating and barely contained in its wooden ribcage. I rubbed the vines, realizing the pulsating of the vines matched Scott's heartbeat. I held the edge of the tub, feeling weak. A vine slowly moving and wrapped itself around my hand. It didn't speak to me in the general sense, more so I felt the meaning. It went beyond needing to be understood. The guilt, the loneliness, all the girls he left behind broken and sobbing. I felt what he had felt in my absence, the good and the ugly. Scott didn't love me the way I loved him, but he missed me, and in his own way he did love me back. I sobbed, crying from all of his pain passing through me. I felt like I was being gutted. The vines leached off of me, prying into my love for him. I wanted to leave. I wanted to leave more than anything. I loved him, but he's gone. There's nothing left of him. Nothing to love. I tried to take my hands off of the bathtub, but noticed the vines held me in place. When I tried to pull against them, they held me tighter and pierced into my skin, tightening and impaling and holding me still. He didn't want me to leave. Whatever was happening, whatever he was changing into, he didn't want it to happen alone. I tried to use my legs to stand and push myself against them, but I found my whole body encaged in their grasp. Scott, please let me go. His dead mouth didn't so much as twitch. The grasp didn't change. Only got tighter against my body once I put any force behind it. I tried one more heavy squirm to fight against the vines and got sent into agony. My arms, my legs, my hands, my thighs, all of them tightened and crushed my body, trying to lock me into position. The only thing I had any control of was my neck and my mouth. I felt my body getting weak, the pain shifting all throughout my body, making me hear my own heartbeat. I could also feel my own blood flow slow and boil into my brain, making every thought a nightmare to hold on to. I love you too, Scott. I cried. I cried it out with a tear while my whole body was burning. I repeated it. I love you. Begging and pleading and praying for the words to go through and for something to change, but nothing did. It just got tighter. I gave up and cried, weeping in the same place and moving my head down to try to put myself against the bathtub. I then noticed just how far I can reach down with my mouth and decided on one final idea. As quickly as I could, I moved my head down and bit down at the vines around my right hand. The bite made my entire right arm burn as if I was gnawing through my own flesh, but I pursued. I bit deeper and deeper, seeing blood leaking from the vines. I chewed and spit and chewed and spit and chewed and spit until I had a weak enough section to tear my hand out of. As I got one limb free, all the others got worse, but I had my strength, and I knew if I didn't fight now, I might never get the chance to fight again. I pulled on my left hand and moved it as close as I could to my mouth. I got it and pulled and dragged it into my mouth and gnawed. With both my hands free, I tried to rip the vines off my legs, but had no such luck. The more I pulled, the worse it got. I couldn't rip the vines off of me. What should I do? What can I do? I looked over at Scott's body. I noticed a small glimmer on his cheek that had fallen from his eye. Scott had been crying. He can't control this, but he's conscious. I know he would have wanted me to. I know he didn't want to be trapped there, in a personal cage. I grabbed onto the wooden ribs, keeping the strange beating heart in his chest, and tore them. They were fragile, wet, weak. They broke off easily. I broke 3 more, giving myself enough space to reach into the chest and grab. It didn't feel fleshy or wet, anything you'd associate a beating heart with. It was almost rubber, some kind of smooth silicone texture that was soft and squishy. I put my hand underneath it and felt it beat and instantly pulled my hand away. The curiosity which had become Scott's heart had shocked me in some way. I looked at my hand and saw tiny specks of green injected into spots around my right hand that burned. I did my best to ignore them and wrapped my hand around the heart. The vines that still had a grip on me began tightening more and more, and I felt like I had seconds before my bones snapped. I couldn't wait anymore. I couldn't take that risk. In between tears, I grabbed, I squeezed, and I pulled. The heart had attached itself into threads of flesh that wouldn't let go quite as easily as I wanted. I slowly pulled the heart closer in the direction of my head, avoiding the pain each beat sent from my hand down my wrist, down my entire body. After one blind moment, it tore. The vines had instantly let go, and I collapsed onto the floor behind me. His heart had lost the pulse and color that made is so magical and strange. Replacing the rubber was an outer layer that had petrified upon losing contact to Scott's body. It was hard, almost wooden, but not quite. It had jagged edges and dents, and along the middle it had a rough part that circled around it. It resembled a really big peach pit. It was a seed. I cradled it, figuring it was harmless now. I stood up and looked at Scott's lifeless body one more time. I weighed the pros and cons of kissing him, but settled on a fist bump, and through knot and agony cried out the last thing I'll ever tell Scott, something I'd rather keep to myself. I went home slowly, taking the rain in every drop at a time. Every noise, every car, every person, every splash of a puddle felt so inconceivable, so distant, so pointless. I walked home, and when I got home I sat down into the corner and cried. I held what used to be Scott's heart against my chest as close to my heart as I could, and I cried. Didn't ever think I'd have to use a fucking flashlight again. My son Josh stormed into the house an hour ago, and I left to get us some food because the fridge had fuck all in it. Sure, the traffic was a little much, but 2 hours of time is not enough for what I came back to. The entire windows from the outside were almost entirely covered in thick, growing, writhing vines. They shifted and moved and rapidly expanded, reaching and clawing for more space to perch onto. I got out of the car without a slight thought of what to do. The vines found an open window and must have accidentally opened the door, as the vines reached out into the outside walls and the pavement lining the floor. Josh is still inside. I didn't have my phone, so I rummaged through an old camping bag in the trunk and found a flashlight. The battery was fucked, but hitting it brought it back for a few seconds, and I decided if it was all I could use, I would abuse it. The vines didn't tear, but they moved on their own accord to avoid whatever force was being put on them. I opened the door, and it slowly slithered away as if alive, while growing longer and longer, stretching itself as far outside as it could to. The small bakery with blue and white walls and a cozy feeling now looked as if abandoned and left to rot. The vines only allowed small beams of sunlight to pierce through the darkness, and whatever fit through the unforgiving tendrils came out in a similar color, painting every surface of wood in a sickening green hue. The vines continued shifting and contracting, grabbing and feeling around different chairs and counters. Any baked goods that came into contact with the vines instantly rotted and became covered in mold. I walked around to the back room where the staircase up to my living room was. The light from the windows didn't reach any further, so I smacked the light into submission and got to see the stairwell in its honest light. The tendrils wrapped around the ceiling, the walls and the floor, shifting once I changed my footing to slowly climb up or hold on to the walls for balance. Vines hung off of the ceiling, curling and moving into the air as if confused fingers trying to find a point of contact. The house was alive. I walked up the stairs as quickly as my fear allowed me. The living room was in a similar state of overgrowth, with one clear difference: vegetation, giant pink daisies coming out of the couch, glowing blue mushrooms growing from the green that had coated the TV. The vines seemed to be growing out of the stairs that led to the third floor, which led to Josh and I's bedrooms. The vines on the stairs here were thicker. They wouldn't move. They were stuck in place and thick, and I tried to avoid touching as many as I could, but there were just too many. Once I finally made it to my son's room, I opened the door, but the flashlight ran out of charge. I smacked it over and over, but the battery must have fully fried on the way up. "Josh?" I called out for my son, but no words came back to me. The only response was two green pulsating orbs I saw in the corner of his room beating together in unison. My sister discovered a universal language, but she hasn't spoken a word since 2003. My sister is a genius. When she was about 13, she made this device that honestly still blows my mind. I've spent my entire life studying physics, and I still don't know what she did or how, which is probably for the best, considering how this all played out. I don't know how she did it, but what I do know is in the summer of 2003, the laws governing matter and atomic mass didn't seem to affect her anymore. She was invisible to the human eye, and she was speaking a universal language we've never been able to identify or reproduce. Before I get into this, though, have you ever seen Firefly? Allow me to quote, "I am very smart. I went to the best Medikid in Osiris, top 3% of my class, finished my internship in 8 months. Gifted is the term. So when I tell you that my little sister makes me look like an idiot child, I want you to understand my full meaning. This could have been written about me and my sisters. We come from a long line of gifted people. My father is a neurologist, my mother works for SpaceX, and my eldest sister is an artist whose work has been featured in galleries since she was 12. I'm a full-time research associate of high-energy density physics at a university I can't name without risking my career. And like Simon Tam from Firefly before me, I don't tell you all of this to flaunt our intelligence or to make us look special. I tell you this so you can fully understand what I mean when I say Nirali made us all look like idiot children. In 2003, I was about to turn 17. My interests weren't like most teen girls, so I won't bore you with the details of what I found more entertaining than TV, books, or the mall. But more often than not, I was occupied with personal research projects. The first time Nirali made herself invisible, I was in the middle of a research rabbit hole. I was deep into some really heady academic articles when I heard Nirali pipe up behind me. "They're wrong, you know." I groaned inwardly. We'd had the knocking talk, but she was still so bad at respecting boundaries. "Nirali, what did we say about knocking?" "Oh," she said, and sounded genuinely surprised. "I didn't think about the door." "What?" I frowned and spun my chair around to look at her. My room was empty. Wait, empty? I looked around briefly before rubbing my eyes, wondering when I'd slept last and already writing the conversation off as an auditory hallucination. Shaking my head, I started to turn back to my computer when I heard her giggle. "All right, jerkhole, where are you?" "Right here," she giggled, her voice coming from directly in front of me. "What the? How? Did you hide the speakers again?" I stood up, taking a moment to really look around the room. She'd pulled a prank like this before, hiding a complex set of speakers she'd modified to create a confluence of sound she could manipulate. It would sound like someone was anywhere in the room she specified. She'd even made it sound like she was moving around. It was really impressive, especially since she'd only been 10 at the time. This time, though, she'd either gotten much better at hiding the speakers or something else was going on. She giggled again. "No speakers, just me." "Okay, just me. But how?" I folded my arms, looking in the direction of her disembodied voice. "That's going to be hard to explain." That was Nirali for, "You won't get it." "Try me," I said, because I'm stubborn. She did, though, and I didn't. I had the beginnings of a migraine chewing on my right eye by the time she was done. Almost none of it made sense. There was something about atomic frequencies and post-dimensional drift, superliminal desynchronization, and something she dubbed the Planck supratemporal parallel. It was all way over my head. "Okay," I said, rubbing my temple as I tried to digest it all. "But how did you get here?" I walked. Infuriating. "I mean, how did you get in here?" I gestured widely to the door, which was closed, and the walls around us. "Oh." I could hear the shrug in her voice. "I just walked where the walls weren't." I squinted at the spot I thought she was standing. "You... what?" She sighed. It was a special sigh. It was the kind of sigh that told you someone much smarter than you was put out at having to dumb something down enough for you to understand. An embarrassed heat flooded my cheeks. I knew she was smarter than me, smarter than all of us, but it still made me feel like I'd failed simple math in front of Neil deGrasse Tyson and a puppy, and they were both disappointed. "I walked where the walls weren't. The walls aren't everywhere, Divya. In fact, in most places like realities, the walls aren't there at all. So I just walked in those places." I wanted to see the proofs of this statement, though I knew she wouldn't have bothered writing them down, except in scraps and incomplete snippets that only made sense to her. I also knew the proofs wouldn't make any more sense than her original explanation. Even so, it bothered me that I only understood what she meant in the vaguest, most conceptual way. It wasn't natural for me. That abstractness of thought warred with the linear way of my brain, making actual understanding impossible, and I hated it. Sana would have understood. Her brain worked that way, but not mine. I must have looked like I was struggling with it, and I was, because she continued on. "Where I am, or technically when and how, everything is a Schrödinger's puzzle of is and isn't. All I have to do is observe the places where the state of something isn't, and go there." This wasn't helping. I mean, I got the basic concept of what she was saying, but in terms of the practical application of physics, it was a mess of meaningless science-y buzzwords. Nothing she said had any foundation in known science. She could have told me I ate ice cream upside down and chanted purple backwards 30 times, and the wall turned to jello, but only as long as I looked at it from a 45-degree angle. And it would have been exactly as scientifically sound as what she'd actually said. Yet she was the one who was invisible, so the limits of my understanding and science itself had no bearing on her corporeal existence. "Do you still have a body? I mean, can you see you?" Oh yeah, she said, her voice pitched higher in excitement. I look like 100 versions of me laid on top of each other. Looking at my hands and stuff is kinda trippy, but I'm here. Cool. I had no idea what to do with this information. She started giggling again. What now? I can't believe you haven't noticed yet. Noticed what? I couldn't keep the flash of irritation out of my voice. It wasn't easy to accept the premise that she'd managed to trick physics into letting her pass through matter while being imperceptible to the human eye, but I'd had just about all the how much dumber than Nirali are you I could take for one day. What language am I speaking? I had to blink at that and think a moment. It's English, isn't it? She giggled again. Say something, I ordered in my most authoritative big sister voice. Nor again is there anyone who loves or pursues or desires to obtain pain of itself, because it is pain, but because occasionally circumstances occur in which toil and pain can procure him some great pleasure. If I concentrated, I could tell the words she was saying didn't quite match what I was apparently translating in my head, but I couldn't hear them for what they were. Except, wait, is that the lorem ipsum translation from definibus bonorum et malorum? She giggled again. Yep, want me to try something in Hindi? Yeah, I said, a little stunned and more than a little curious. Go for it. May he in whose lap shines forth the daughter of the mountain king, who carries the celestial stream on his head, on whose brow rests the crescent moon, whose throat holds poison and whose breast is support of a huge serpent, and who is adorned by the ashes on his body. May that chief of gods, the Lord of all, the destroyer of the universe, the omnipresent Shiva, the moon-like Shankara, ever protect me. I frowned, torn between focusing on the words and trying to identify what she was quoting. I started mouthing some of the words as my mind ran back over them, and gawped a little as recognition settled in. Did you just quote the Ramcharitmanas Ayodhya Kand invocation? Another giggle. But how? That didn't sound like Hindi at all. Fascinating, she said. It didn't feel like Hindi when I said it, but I was thinking the Hindi words. What did it sound like to you? English, I guess. I mean, it didn't sound like anything, but I understood you in English. That's so cool. Can you actually hear something other than English? Kinda. I mean, almost. If I try, I can tell the sounds you're making don't match the meaning of the words I'm not hearing, but understanding. But the meaning overrides everything else, so I can't actually identify individual sounds or phrases. Do you think you could identify the physical linguistics if we went word by word? It may be the processing of complete phrases prevents the identification of individual phonemes. Maybe, I said, shrugging, still trapped in awe of this aspect of her discovery. We could try it. She had me run her through some general object identification to give me a chance to listen for the sounds she was making, and how they differed from the words I knew, the words I was hearing, but I only ever caught the ghosts of divergent beginnings and ends. She thought this was hilarious. I thought it was magical. She started making regular trips to my room in this state, usually after lights out or when our parents were at work. I didn't blame her for sneaking. Sana wasn't into the science stuff, and if our parents knew what we'd been up to, we'd have been grounded for life, especially since Nirali had already been banned from experimental projects at home. The last one had required a lot of external help and several $1,000s to clean up. But someone had to try and catalog this universal lexicon, and this was the only way we had access to it. One night, as we lay awake on the floor naming objects, we'd tried making individual sounds before, but without the intent of meaning behind them, there was no divergence. Nirali froze. I couldn't see her, of course, but something changed. She stilled to the point I worried she'd maybe phased through the floor or something and left me alone. But somehow I still felt her presence along with something sharp and alien I couldn't identify. Nirali? I whispered, cold unease settling on me like snow. Shh. It was her, but so quiet I almost missed it. I felt the urgency behind it, though, and hushed to wait in the silence with her. As the seconds ticked by, a prickling dread crawled across the room. It started at the edges where the shadows were thickest and spread outward, tainting everything it touched, including me. My pulse quickened as a primal paranoia sank in. I knew it was just Nirali and me, but it felt like a predator was stalking the shadows, searching for us, and it was only our silence that kept it from pouncing. To keep the paranoia at bay, I focused on the warm red readout of the clock above my desk. The slowly changing numbers were soothing and hypnotic. They dulled the edges of my fear until, at some point between midnight and 2 a.m., I fell asleep. I only realized this when Nirali finally whispered my name, pulling me back to reality. "Divya, wake up." I swam back to consciousness slowly, shaking off the half-formed discomfort of a dream I couldn't remember. It's gone now. What's gone? I rubbed the sleep still clogging my vision and blinked at the clock above my desk. So late. Had we really been laying on the floor for 2 hours? Nirali didn't answer. Not for a long time. Long enough that I thought maybe I'd dreamed her waking me up entirely. "The shadow behind the walls," she whispered, cutting the silence away like cobwebs. There was a weight to her words I couldn't describe that tickled the primal centers of my brain again. An ancient urge calling to me, telling me to hide. "The... what?" I croaked, propping myself up on my elbows. But Nirali was gone, not just quiet. There was a difference in the room when she left, and I could always sense it, even if she didn't say she was going. A few minutes later, she was at my bedroom door, actually knocking. The sound startled me, giving my heart a sudden workout with a spike of adrenaline. I snuck over to the door to let her in. Too keenly aware of the night around me and jumping at shadows I suddenly worried couldn't be trusted. Without a word, she slipped past me and crawled into bed, hiding beneath the covers with her knees against the wall and her back to me. I took my cue as it was offered and crawled in behind her, offering myself as protection against the night. Sleep was slow in coming as my body flushed the survival instinct from its veins, but eventually it must have come as the next thing I knew the sun was peeking through the windows and Nirali was watching me sleep. "Divya?" Nirali said my name like she was testing it, as if she didn't expect to hear it again. "Yeah?" "Nothing," she said, curling back under the covers before adding, "Thanks." It was a week before she came to me through the walls again. "I think it's drawn to the language," she said, pulling me out of a dream about superfluid. "What is?" I yawned, oddly comfortable with the resumption of our nightly conversations. "The shadow behind the walls." "What is that?" "I don't know. Something big. Something old. Older than time, maybe." "What's with the sauna talk? Older than time." "I don't know, Divya, that's just what it feels like." She was always like this, caught somewhere between science and emotion, like the perfect cross between me and sauna. I think it allowed her to think abstractly enough to escape the box of the known to innovate, while remaining linear enough to build a new box to house her innovations. But sometimes it meant she didn't have the math to back it up. Sometimes it was just a feeling or the hint of a notion, but even then Nirali's feelings were always spot on, even if it took science a few decades to prove it. "All right," I said, accepting that answer. It was odd, I realized then, how a few weeks of exposure to what my mind told me was factually impossible opened me to the flexibility of the possible. I was surprised, too, when I noticed my first instinct wasn't to challenge her or demand proof, just because what she said was beyond my experience or immediate comprehension. Instead, I would nod and accept that what she said, what she experienced, was simply truth, and the limitations of my understanding couldn't change that. "What does it want?" "I don't know. I don't think it talks, but I think it listens and understands." "That's unsettling," I said, shifting under the covers. The superstitious child in me made sure my feet were hidden in the center of the bed because the shadows still couldn't be trusted. She hummed her agreement. "It's not the only thing here, though." A chill surged through me, prompting my heart into a panicked gallop. "What do you mean?" "I mean there are other things, big things, old things. Most of them can't see me, I think. I'm not really where they are, same as I'm not really where you are, but they can hear me, same as you." "Are you safe?" Nirali was silent. My stomach churned because I knew it meant something big and old and dangerous was near enough to pose a threat. After several minutes passed, she answered, "Sometimes. Only sometimes?" I sat up, staring at the spot on the floor where she would have been seated. "Only sometimes." "Then why are we still doing this, Nirali? I wouldn't have agreed if I knew you were in danger." "I know," she said quietly, "but there's so much here. If I focus on a color, I can experience everything that color has ever been and ever will be. If I think about a time, I'm sitting in what used to be here, or sometimes what will be here, watching a blur of activity that won't happen for another 1,000 years. I've seen cities you can't even begin to imagine, made of glittering bone and glass. Monolithic wonders to shame the gods. Last night I was standing in the center of a black hole. Not a hologram or a simulation, but an actual black hole. Captured, contained, reproduced, harnessed, I don't know what. But it was here, and so was I, and through the black hole I saw so many other universes, all laid out like mirrors into infinity. "Nirali," I whispered, both awed and terrified. Had she been experiencing these things every night? All the hours we talked about nothing and nonsense? "But there are also bigger things," she said, her voice dipping into darkness. "Things that hide in the glint of starlight on glass. Things that follow me back from the future and wait for me in the past. They skip like stones on water, only touching the surface for a minute and never with their whole selves. But even that much is too much. It hurts to look at them. There are too many shapes at once, and all of them are hungry in ways I don't understand." Tears welled in my eyes as I listened to her. It hurt to accept these things as truth. I couldn't understand them, or touch them, or even experience them myself, but I had to accept they were real, because my sister was invisible. She could pass through matter at will and spoke a universal language to me every night. But accepting all that also meant accepting that my sister spent every night compelled by her own curiosity to go back to this dangerous state again and again, only to be terrified by what waited in between. I'm glad they can't see me, but I don't think that will be true much longer. "What? Why?" "The shadow behind the walls has been in my room all week. I can feel it following me around. It's listening now, but I don't think it will come in your room again." "Nene, you have to stop this." "I can't," she said, her voice thick with imminent tears. "Of course you can. Just come back and we'll destroy whatever you've been using to shift. We can fix this." "No," she said, the word wet and bent beneath an anguish no 13-year-old should have known. "You don't understand. What could possibly be worth the risk?" My heart broke in the silence that stretched between us. An eternity of pain and longing swirled between us, and one final fragile breath spoke of the tears she held back when she found her voice again. "I can't speak English anymore." I didn't understand. Like the first time she described the math to me, this statement defied understanding. "What do you mean you can't speak English anymore?" "I mean I can't speak anything but this stupid between language, Divya. I tried and tried all week, but all that comes out now is this ugly mess of gurgles and scrapes and noises I don't recognize, and I'm so scared. I'm so scared because they can still hear me when I'm out there with you. And out there, I'm not invisible. And you and Sana and Mom and Dad aren't invisible. And none of us are safe when I'm out there. And the only time I can talk right is when I'm in here," she sobbed. "When I'm here with you." My heart turned somersaults in my stomach. I let this happen. I should have stopped her the day she showed me her stupid science-shattering trick. "Nene," I whispered, and all I wanted to do was hold her until everything was right. "You have to come back. I don't know what we'll do to fix this, but you can't stay there." "I know," she said through a heavy veil of tears. "I just didn't want to lose you. To lose us." "You still have me." "But I won't out there, not like this." I didn't have a good answer for her. "We'll find a way to fix it," was all I could say, and we both knew it wasn't enough. We also knew that it had to be, because we didn't have a choice. I felt her presence fade, and a few minutes later there was a quiet knock at my door. Nirali stood on the other side, shaking as silent sobs racked her narrow frame. I gathered her up, shutting the door behind her, and together we curled around each other on the floor and cried. We cried until we passed out from exhaustion and woke up long after the sun had risen. I woke to Nirali watching me again and blinked away the haze of tear-stained sleep. "Nirali?" She nodded, mute, a sadness hanging over her shoulders. "Can you?" She shook her head. "Nothing?" She glanced up, looking over me and toward the hall as someone passed by. I could tell a million thoughts were flitting through her head in that moment, most of them conflicting. But after a minute or so, a stony resolution had settled in her eyes, and she scooted closer, waving for me to do the same. Her mouth was almost against my ear when something unimaginably foul rattled from her lips. A shudder of revulsion rocked through me at the sound of each mangled phoneme. I've never been so disgusted and terrified in my life. I could hear her voice, but it was dripping with caustic venom, dragging over hot coals, buried in the deepest ocean and clawing at the edges of sanity with angry talons. It was wrong, and to this day it was the most vile, viscerally upsetting experience of my life. The words, this language, was never meant to be spoken by man. Science won't support me, but I know in my bones these words have power man wasn't meant to use. And yet, despite my mind rebelling from the mere sound of her voice warped around these hideous words, I still knew what she'd meant, as if she'd said it in English. "Don't tell Mom and Dad." Something walks whistling past my house every night at 3:03. Every night, no matter the weather, something walks down our street whistling softly. You can only hear it if you're in the living room or the kitchen when they walk by, and it always starts at exactly 3:03. The sound starts faint, somewhere near the beginning of the lane near the Carson place. We're towards the middle of the street, so the whistling moves past us before fading away in the direction of the cul-de-sac. When I was younger, my sister and I would sneak into the kitchen some nights to listen. Mom and Dad didn't like that, and we'd catch hell if they found us out there. But they were never too hard on us since we always stuck to the one big rule. Don't try to look at whatever was whistling. My neighborhood is a funny place. I've lived here since I was 6, and I love it. The houses are small but well kept, good-sized yards, plenty of places to roam. There are a lot of other kids here my age. I turned 13 back in October. We grew up together and would always play foursquare in the cul-de-sac or roam around from back porch to back porch in the summer. This was a good place to grow up. I'm old enough to see it. And there's only the two strange things here, the night whistling and the good luck. The whistling never bothered me much. Like I said, I couldn't even hear it from my bedroom. But Mom and Dad don't like talking about it, so I've stopped asking questions. My dad is a strong guy, tall and calm. He has an accent since he moved to the US as a kid. His family, my grandparents, they're from the islands. That's what they call it. My dad, the only time he isn't so calm is if the whistler comes up. He talks a little quicker then, eyes move faster, and he tells us not to think about it so much and to always remember the one rule. The big rule: don't try to look outside when the whistler goes past. Not that we could look, even if we wanted. See, there are shutters on the inside of every window, thick pieces of heavy canvas that pull down from the top and latch to the bottom of the window frame. Each latch even has a small lock, about the size of what you'd find on a diary. My dad locks those shutters every night before we all go to bed and keeps the key in his room. My mom, I don't know what she thinks about the whistling. I've seen her out in the living room before at 3:03 when the sound starts. I could see her if I cracked my door open just an inch to peek. She's not out there often, at least I haven't caught her much. But once or twice a month I think she sits out there on our big red couch just listening. The whistler has the same tune every night. It's cheerful. Da-da-da-da-da-da-dum. Da-da-da-da-da-da-dum. Remember how I said there are two odd things about where I live? Well, besides our night whistler, everyone in my neighborhood is really lucky. It's hard to explain, and Dad doesn't like us talking about this part much either. But good things just seem to happen to people around here a lot. Usually it's small things, winning a radio contest, or getting an unexpected promotion at work, or finding some arrowheads buried in the yard, the authentic kind. The weather is pretty good and there's no crime, and everybody's gardens bloom extra bright in the fall. A million little blessings, I've heard my mom say about living here. But the main reason we stay here, why we moved here in the first place, is my sister Nola. She was born very sick, something with her lungs. We couldn't even bring her home when she was born, only visit her in the hospital. She was so small, I remember, small even compared to the other babies. A machine had to breathe for her. We moved into our house here to be closer to the hospital. As soon as we moved here, Nola started getting better. The doctors couldn't figure it out, they chalked it up to whatever they were doing, but we all could tell they were confused. But my parents knew, even I knew, Nola getting better was just another of the million little blessings we got for living in our neighborhood. So that's why we stayed even after we found out that for every small miracle that happens here every day now and then, some bad things happen. But they only happen if you look for the whistler. See, our neighborhood has a welcoming committee. They show up with macaroni casserole and a gift basket and a manila folder whenever someone new moves in. They're very friendly. 4 people showed up when we moved in 7 years ago. The committee made small talk, gave me a Snickers bar, and took turns holding Nola. It was her first week out of the hospital, so they were extra careful. Then the committee asked to speak to my parents in private, so I was sent to my room where I still managed to hear nearly every word. The welcoming committee told my parents about how nice the neighborhood was, really exceptionally, hard to explain kind of nice. And then they told my parents about the even harder to explain whistling that happened every morning at 3:03 and ended at the tick of 3:05. The group, our new neighbors, warned my parents that the whistling was quiet, would never harm or hurt us, as long as we didn't look for what was making the sound. This part they stressed, and I pushed my ear into the door, straining to hear them. People who went looking for the whistler had their luck change, sometimes tragically. A black cloud would hang over anyone that looked. Anything that could go wrong would. The manila envelope the committee brought over contained newspaper clippings, stories about car crashes and ruined lives, public deaths, and freak accidents. Not everyone dies, I heard the head of the committee tell my dad, but the life goes out of them. Even if they live, there's no light in them ever again, no presence. My mom, I could tell she wasn't taking it seriously. She kept asking if this was some prank they play on new neighbors. At one point, my mom got angry, accused the committee of trying to scare us out of our new home, asked them if they were racist on account of my dad being from the islands. My dad calmed her down, told her he could tell our new neighbors were sincere, and they were just trying to help us. He explained that he grew up hearing these kinds of stories from his mom, and that he knew there were strange things that walked among us. Some of those strange things were good, and some were bad, but most were just different. After the committee left, Dad went out to the hardware store, bought the canvas blinds, the latches, and the locks, and installed them on every window in the house after dinner. That first night in our new house, I crept out of my room at 3 a.m., only to find my dad awake, sitting on the living room couch holding my baby sister. My dad held up his finger in a shh motion but patted the couch next to him. I sat, and we waited. At exactly 3:03, we heard the whistling. Da-da-da-da-da-dum, da-da-da-da-da-dum. It came and it went just like our neighbors said. The whistling returns each night and we never look, and we enjoy our million little blessings every day. Nola breathes on her own and she's grown into a strong, clever girl. My dad even joined the welcoming committee. We don't get new neighbors often, why would anyone want to leave? But when a new family moves in, my dad and the committee bring them macaroni casserole, a gift basket, and the manila folder. I can always tell by the look on my dad's face when he comes back if the family took the committee seriously or if we'd be getting new neighbors again very soon. Not long ago, a family moved in directly next to us. The previous owner, Ms. Maddie, passed away at age 105. She'd lived a good, long life. Our new neighbors seemed like they'd fit in just fine. They believed the welcoming committee, took my dad's advice about the locking shutters since they had a young child of their own. Whatever newspaper clippings were in that manila envelope, whatever evidence, my dad never let us see. But I imagine it must have been awfully convincing since our neighbors got along with no issues for the first month. One night when our new neighbors had to leave town, They sent their son, Holden, to stay with us. He was 12, a year under me in school. I didn't know him well before that night, but as soon as his parents dropped him off after dinner, I could tell it was going to be a bad time. "Do you know who is always out there whistling every night?" Holden asked the moment the adults left the room. The three of us were sitting in the den, some Disney movie playing idly on the television. My sister and I exchanged a glance. "We don't talk about that," I said. "I think it's that weirdo that lives in the big yellow house on the corner," Holden said. "Mr. Tolles?" my sister asked. "No way, he's really nice." Holden shrugged. "Must be a psycho killer then." Nola tensed. "We don't talk about it," I repeated. "Let's go in my room and play Nintendo." We spent the next few hours playing games, eating popcorn, and then watching movies. A typical sleepover, but I could see Holden was getting antsy. After my parents had wished us a good night, locked the blinds, and gone to bed, Holden stood up from his beanbag and walked over to where Nola and I were sitting on my bed. "Have you ever even tried looking?" he asked. "It's nearly time." Like most sleepovers, we'd conveniently ignored any suggestion of a bedtime. I was shocked to see he was right. It was almost 3 a.m. I sighed. "We don't... See, I can't even try to look because my dad locks the blinds every night and hides the key," he continued, ignoring me. "So does our dad," said Nola. "No," replied Holden. "No, he doesn't." "You saw him do it," I said, a little sharper than I meant to sound. Holden grinned. "Your dad locks the blinds, yeah, but he doesn't hide the key. He keeps it right on his normal keychain." "So?" I asked, worried I already knew what he would say next, because I had noticed that my dad didn't bother hiding the key anymore after all of these years, because he knew we took it seriously. "So, after your dad locked up but before your parents went to bed, I went to the bathroom, and on my way, I may have peeked into their room, and I may have seen your dad's keychain on his nightstand, and I maybe went and borrowed the key to blinds." Nola and I stared, and his grin only grew wider. "You're lying," I said. Holden shrugged. "You can check if you want. Just open your parents' door and look, you'll see his keychain right there on the nightstand." "Stay here," I told both of them. "Don't move a muscle." I hurried over to my parents' room but hesitated at the door. If Holden wasn't lying, my dad would be angry. Beyond angry. I was scared thinking about it, but more scared of an open window with the whistler right outside. I opened the door, barely an inch, and looked in, but it was too dark to see. Taking a deep breath, I walked into the room. 2 steps into the dark, I froze. The whistling started, and I could hear it clearly from my parents' room. I never realized, but they must have heard the sound every night since we moved into the house. They never told us. I don't think I could have slept through it. I stood there, listening to the whistling come closer, unsure whether I should turn on a light or call out for my dad. Soft sounds from the living room brought me back to reality. "Nola!" I yelled, running out of my parents' room. Holden and Nola were standing near the front door next to a window. Holden wasn't lying. I could see him fumbling with the lock on one of the blinds. I heard a click. He did have the key. Holden let out a quick laugh. Nola stood next to him, hunched up, afraid but maybe curious. The whistling was right outside our house now. I think I made a sound, called out. I can't remember. Time felt frozen, clock hands nailed to the face, but I found myself moving. I'm not fast. I've never been athletic. Somehow, though, I covered the space between myself and Nola in a moment. My eyes were locked on her, but I heard Holden pull the blind all the way down so it could release. I heard the snap of it start to raise, and I heard the whistling just on the other side of the window. But I had my arms around Nola and I turned us so she was facing away from the window. At the same time, I jammed my eyes shut. The blind whipped open. The whistling stopped. I felt Nola shaking in my arms. "Don't look, okay?" I told her. "Don't turn around." We were positioned so that she was facing back towards the hallway and I was facing the window. My eyes were still closed. I felt her nod into my shoulder. I reached out with the arm not holding Nola and tried to touch Holden. My hand brushed against his arm. He was shaking worse than Nola. "Holden?" I asked. Silence. I reached past him and gingerly felt for the window, eyes still sealed shut. The glass was cold against my fingertips, colder than it should have been for the time of year. I moved my hand up the window, searching for the string to the blind. The glass began to get warmer the further I reached, and there was a gentle hum feeding back into my fingertips. I tried not to think about what might be on the other side of the window. Finally, I touched the string and yanked the blinds shut. I opened my eyes. In the dim light leaking out from the kitchen, I could make out Holden, pale and small, staring at the now closed window. "Holden?" I asked again. He turned towards me and he screamed. Everything became a flurry of motion. Lights sparked to life in the hall, then the living room. My parents' footsteps thudded across the hardwood floor. I didn't turn to look back at them. My eyes were glued to Holden. He was pale, had bit his lip so hard there was a thin red line of blood running down his chin, and he'd wet himself. "What happened?" my dad asked from behind me. I managed to swivel away from Holden and look back. He looked. I'd never seen my dad scared before, but I saw it that night, in that moment, an old, ugly terror stitched on his face. A parent's fear. "Just Holden?" he mouthed to me. I nodded yes. My dad let out a breath. He looked so relieved I nearly expected him to cheer. But then he turned to Holden, and my dad's face changed. I wondered if he felt bad for feeling good that Holden was the only one that looked. There was a knock at the door. We all froze. Holden whimpered. "Don't answer it," my mom said. She stood at the threshold of the hall. I'd always thought she was a skeptic and just humored my dad about the windows and the whistler, but that night we were all believers. I noticed that both of my parents held baseball bats they must have taken from their bedroom. The knock came again, a little louder this time. "Please don't open the door," Holden whispered. My dad walked over to him, hugged him close. "We won't," my dad promised, still holding his bat. "Nothing is coming in here tonight." Thud, thud, thud. This time the knocking was loud enough to rattle the door. Holden screamed again and Nola clutched her arms around my neck. My mom came over and knelt down next to us, wrapping my sister and me close. Thud, thud, thud. "Call the police," my mom whispered to my dad. The knocking instantly stopped. My dad looked over his shoulder at us. "Do you think—" He was cut off by frantic knocking that trailed off to a polite tap, tap, tap. "Police," something said from the other side of the door. The voice from outside sounded exactly like my mom, like a parrot repeating the words back to her. "Police. Call. The police. Tap, tap, tap. Police." My mom pulled us closer. "Police. Police. Police. Police." "Please stop," I heard her whisper. "I don't think calling them will help," my dad said. "How will we know when they're the ones at the door?" The knocking came back harder than before. The door shook, then it stopped. After a long moment, I heard the knocking again, but it was coming from our back door. We all turned together towards the back door, but the knocking immediately returned to the front door. Front to back to front. Loud, then quiet, then loud again. Suddenly the sound was coming from both doors at once, big, heavy blows like a sledgehammer. Then something started rapping against all of the windows in the house, then the walls. It was like we were living inside a drum with a dozen people trying to play at once. Or we were a turtle and something was attempting to claw us out of our shell. "Stop!" Holden yelled. The knocking died. "I won't tell," Holden said, staring at the door. "I promise I won't tell anyone what I saw. Just please go away." We waited for nearly a minute. Then we heard it, a soft tap, tap, tap coming from the window Holden had looked through earlier. Holden started to cry, sobbing like a prisoner watching gallows being built outside their cell. My dad held him, brushed his hair, but never lied to him, never told him things would be okay. The tapping at the window went on for the rest of the night. We huddled together in the living room for I don't know how long. Eventually, my mom tried to take us kids into my room while my dad stayed to watch the door. But the second we moved into my bedroom, the knocking came back, so loud it was possible to ignore. I was afraid the door couldn't take it. We went back to the living room and the knocking stopped. Only the tap-tap-tap on the window remained. None of us slept that night. The tapping stopped around 7 a.m. That's about the time the sun comes up here. We waited another 2 hours before my dad opened the blinds from one window. He made us all go back to my parents' bedroom first. I heard him open the door, then come back in. "Okay," he told us, "it's done." Holden's parents came back around lunchtime. My mom and dad walked Holden over to his house, and they all went inside for quite a while. Nola and I watched from the window. She stuck to me the whole day, right at my side, sometimes holding my hand. When my parents came back, they looked grim, but wouldn't tell us what they said to Holden's family. It was a Sunday, so we all spent the day together, ordered pizza, and watched movies. That night, everyone slept in my room. Nola and my mom in the bed with me, my dad in a chair he'd pulled over. There was no knocking that night or any night since. We didn't see much of Holden or his parents for the rest of that week, but by Thursday, there was a moving truck in their driveway. Nola and I watched them packing up the whole afternoon after school. What sticks with me most is how tired Holden and his parents looked. All three had the same pallor, grim mouths, and lightless eyes. Even from across the street, I could tell something was very wrong. Holden and his family were gone before sunset. I remember what the original welcoming committee said to my parents when we moved in. Not everyone who looks at the Whistler dies, but even those that live have the light go out of them, and the rest of their lives are full of misfortune. A million little tragedies. I think Holden's parents must have looked, either to comfort him if they didn't believe or share the burden if they did. I watch Nola some days, happy and young and alive, and I wonder if I'd been slower, if she'd looked out the window that night. Would I have looked too? To comfort her? To share that burden? I'm glad I don't have to find out. We still live in that house, in that neighborhood. We still hear our Whistler walking past every night. The blessings, the luck, the good things here are too good to leave. But we're careful. We don't have friends over to spend the night anymore. And my dad hides the key to the blinds very, very well. Not that I've gone looking. Some things you just don't need to look for.
Recently, I met a medium who promised me proof. Read this to the end, and you will believe too. I'm sitting on a sofa in a cramped, messy room. The carpet is faded and stained, the wallpaper peeling, and spots of mold speckle the ceiling. Everything about this old house screams disrepair. Next to me on the sofa, an old man with sagging, papery skin sits staring at an empty chair in the corner. A younger man, somewhere in his 30s, in a suit with a slick haircut and white smile of a dentist, or maybe a realtor, flashes his pearly whites at the old man and says, "Hello, sir. My name is Nathan. I'm a spiritual medium. Your family reached out to me and asked for my services. Can you tell me some of what you've been experiencing?" "She's there," growls the old man, still staring at the empty chair in the corner. "Who's there?" Nathan, the medium, glances at the chair. Back to the old man. "Who is it you see sitting in that chair?" He sniffs, wrinkles up his mouth in a frown. "Dunno her name. For the record, I don't believe in any of this stuff. I am here because I don't believe. I'm also recording this entire interaction. The old man, the medium, the invisible woman in the chair in the corner. I make sure to get the chair. Lots of footage of it. I am tempted to get up and go sit in it. But that would ruin this whole charade, wouldn't it? Anyway, I just keep filming." Nathan, the smarmy medium, who should be a realtor, looked confused when he first looked at the empty chair, but is now playing along, full woo-woo psychic mode, saying stuff like, to the woman in the chair, "Can I ask what you are doing here? What is it you would like to communicate?" Silence, and Nathan asks the old man, "Do you see any change in her?" The old man shakes his head. "She's just sitting there." A few minutes more of a lot of nothing. The medium decides to cast a blessing on the room to help put her spirit to rest. And then the old man sits up straight. His eyes go big. He says, "She's getting up." Then she's laughing. She's cursing at us. Then he starts whimpering. She's coming closer. She's coming. She's coming. Stop her. He starts screaming, and the medium leaps up, chanting words of a prayer in what is probably Google translated Latin. He waves a hunk of burning sage and sprinkles salt, while the old man screams. I get the whole thing on my phone. The screaming, the sage, the sweat on Nathan the medium's brow, as he shouts with increasing ferocity over the old man's howls, snarling at the empty chair. And when the moment is right, I yell, "Cut!" The old man stops screaming. His face breaks into a grin as he turns to me. How was that, Max? Brilliant, Pete. You were brilliant, I say, angling my phone toward myself and also speaking to the cameras we have set up to catch the psychic at work. I speak to my future audience, you all, who should subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. This is Pete, an actor. I'm Max, host of Debauchery and Debunkery, where we used to take a shot for each lie, but quickly realized we get drunk way too fast. Now, we just debunk stuff and get drunk later while laughing about it. The only person who is not an actor here is Nathan the medium, who, as you can see, quickly began speaking to an empty chair. Nathan, you stated several times that you could sense the presence in the chair. What do you have to say now that you know Pete here is an actor? Nathan has lost his charm. He stammers, red-faced, furious at having been set up, looking between me and Pete and the chair, as if unsure which of us is the most to blame for his predicament. He insists his powers are genuine and babbles that there is a spiritual energy in the chair, while I go on to remark about how the chair itself is from Target. We bought it this morning. So was there spiritual energy at the department store before we brought it in? He says it must be with the house then. I tell him how the house itself is a set. It's actually my house, and I live here. And this entry room doesn't usually look like this. We made it grubbier for effect. Though, I add, I guess you're right. There's not the greatest vibes. Feng Shui has always been a little off in here. And I do need to replace the carpet. The stains are real. The mold spots on the ceiling are fake. You get the idea. Call me Max, short for Maxine, or Maximilian, depending on my mood. I'm currently Nathan the medium's worst nightmare. What you are doing is entrapment, he snarls, his ruddy red face on the verge of tears. Oh, his business is gonna take a hit, all right. He keeps barking at me. You act so sanctimonious, but this bullshit is hurting people. You're hurting people by dismissing their beliefs, disrespecting the spiritual. I laugh at him. I'd say that's exactly what you're doing by taking advantage of people, just like you tried with Pete here. I bet you go into schools and debunk Santa Claus to the little kids. How telling that you compare what you do to lying to children. So you know you're lying. You just think it's okay because they're feel-good lies. You know what? Make fun all you want, but this stuff is real. You're a fool to mess with it. He turns and storms out. My last shot of him is both middle fingers held up. His dramatic exit is marred almost immediately by his return moments later, his face now blank as thrusts a business card into my hand. For skeptics, he says, call her, and she'll make you believe. Thanks for the tip, Nathan. Probably won't, though. It usually doesn't work when people know ahead of time. Call her. She will make you believe, he repeats again before turning on his heel and striding out. I look at the card. It just says, make believe on one side, and on the other is an eye and a number. The eye has a nifty effect, where it appears to always be looking at you, The card is matte black, with simple lettering. I tuck it in my pocket. A few days later, Nathan the medium contacts me via text. The episode has already aired. I'm sure Nathan is pissed about it. No doubt, he's getting a lot of emails and calls. He's getting roasted in the comments. So is messaging me. It's not surprising. Probably to beg me to remove it, offer to bribe me. I've had all kinds of things. His message, when I open it, surprises me. Forget what I said about the card. Just throw it away, please. Now, I've always been a contrarian. Had forgotten about the card until that moment. But of course, after his request, I go digging it up. The matte black, the eye, the words, make believe, and the number to call. I call it, out of curiosity, making sure to record the call. So I'll have material later for an episode if this turns into anything. There's no ringing, just a voice, connecting almost immediately. The address is redacted. Come if you want to believe. Corny, probably not worth the effort of a debunk, but the address isn't too far from my sister's house, and I have to visit her anyway to help her with a few things and talk about my brother-in-law. He's battling cancer. I make a note about it, and the next day, before I head over to see my sister, I swing by the address. It takes a while to find. A small psychic reading shop. More of a nook, really, tucked between a bakery and a bookstore. You have to go down a set of stairs to even find the door, and the room is so small, it feels like stepping into a janitor's closet. The woman inside is neither old nor young. She's somewhere between 30 and 50. An unremarkable bird of a woman with beady dark eyes and hair like a crow's wings. Glossy black with a bluish sheen, must be dyed. She's sitting in a chair in the corner, in a long black gown, stiff as a doll, that's been posed. She has only one eye, which follows me as I step in and sit down in the chair opposite her. The other eye is shrouded in shadow. Also, the lights in here are very low. It's a nice effect, hokey, but visually arresting. Props to her for atmosphere. Minus a few points for being so cliche. "Hello, Max," says the woman. So Nathan obviously did give her the heads up. So much for debunking. Even so, I ask her if I can record. She cackles a little and motions for me to go ahead. So I take out my phone and start recording us both. Though I don't have much hope for anything from this given. She's already been prepped for me by Nathan. Still, why not? I clear my throat and say, "I'm told you can make anyone believe." "Sure," she agrees. "Okay, make me believe." Her head cocks, raven-like, and she examines me. Her eye drifts to the camera. "Is this really what you want, Max? To be made to believe? Me and my viewers, and your viewers." Again, that throaty chuckle. How nice. All right then, Max, the debunker. I'll make a bargain with you. In 5 days, if I've made you believe, you publicly announce your belief before you end yourself and your channel. If you still don't believe in 5 days, nothing happens to you. The sheer gall of this lunatic, I can't help smiling. And myself and my channel, I echo. That's the worst bargain I've ever heard. Why would I agree to that? Because you don't believe. You believe you won't believe. And you're an arrogant shit who wants clicks. And making this bargain will give them to you. She makes actually a very good point. Also, she's right. I absolutely do not believe. I say as much to my camera. And then say, "Okay, crazy lady. Fine, I accept your bargain. But just recording this to note that I have no plans to commit suicide. And if I appear to do so, and this lady has murdered me, I expect her to be arrested." She just looks at me with a flat, black eye. "So how are you going to make me believe?" I ask. Tell me the names of 3 people. She grunts. Kenji, I say. My brother-in-law. He dies on Friday, she says. Loses his battle with cancer. My condolences. Wow. Okay. Obviously, you did your research. It's called a hot reading, when a purported psychic will look up information about a subject before the reading and then recite facts about them that seem astonishing to the audience. Nathan told her I was coming, so she obviously looked up my brother-in-law and his condition. My brother-in-law could pass at any time. Friday is very specific, but it's not a bad gamble. I find it in poor taste. She throws out his death so casually, though, wagering her whole charade on his ill health. That one's too easy, she says, as if agreeing with my thoughts. Who else? Sarah, my sister, who is going through it right now with Kenji's illness. She shakes her head. Nothing much happens to her in the next 5 days, except for grieving her husband. Name someone else. What? Number? You said I could name anybody. I named Sarah. You can't make a prediction for her. She sighs and rolls her eyes. It's your episode, Max. There are plenty of more interesting options, but fine. Your sister Sarah forgets a bag of groceries and has to go back for it. Inside are 2 apples, some herbal medicine your brother-in-law requested that she'll never get a chance to deliver to him, and chocolates for you. This is all so specific. Already, I'm thinking of how it could be staged. Could this woman bribe one of the store workers at the co-op my sister shops at? Or maybe this make-believe woman has got a bug in her ear now. Someone is whispering stuff to her, and they've been watching Sarah, and the shopping has already happened. I'm still considering how elaborate this might be, or if she's just doing what most of these scammers do. Lie. The woman says, I'll pick the 3rd person because you're about to say Mateo. And yes, his wife is cheating on him. You'll say it's too easy for me to have guessed. You think I have an accomplice listening and feeding me clues. So instead, let's pick Pete. In 3 days, he has a heart attack from seeing her. Seeing who? The woman in the chair. Her lips curve in a ghastly smile. Pete the actor. There's no woman in any chair. I paid him to make her up. He'll call you in 3 days, and he'll tell you he's been seeing her. He'll beg you to make her go away. He'll warn you. He'll plead. He's an actor, I snap. Did you hire him? He'll say that he knew you'd say that. He'll beg you to believe him, but you won't. Well, this last one sounds easy enough to stage. Anyway, though if they can make the stuff happen with my sister, I'll be both really impressed and probably filing a lawsuit for stalking. As for my brother-in-law, it's disgusting they'd even talk about him that way. Oh, Max, she says, as I am leaving, take my card. I love referrals. Refer me to someone else, and maybe I'll make them believe in your place. Whatever, I growl and step out of the place, ascending the stairs into the bright sun. She makes my skin crawl. Not because she's connected to the occult, but because she's a charlatan who lies without any sense of moral compunction. A parasite feeding on people's superstitions. I've made it my career to expose people like her. These kinds of scammers are the reason my father ended up losing so much money, destitute and desperately believing that the woman, if she even was a woman, catfishing him, was in love with him. He believed she was planning to elope with him until he succumbed to COVID during the pandemic. Exposing the lies can't bring him back or undo the harm that was caused to our family, but it might prevent someone else from falling for a similar scheme. When I get home, I review the footage of my encounter with the make-believe woman and decide that next week I'll splice it with some footage of all her predictions not coming true. It'll make a decent short reel, I guess, though not dissimilar from other reels where I've exposed frauds. I save the footage and forget about it. 2 days later, on Friday, my brother-in-law's passing coincides with the first prediction, but his death was already foretold by the doctors, and I dismiss the coincidence for the rest of the day. I am talking to family. I console my sister, Sarah. I spend the night and check in on her every few hours. She has barely stopped crying and hasn't eaten anything. The next day, I'm still trying to console her when my phone rings. It's from an unsaved number. I don't pick up, but it rings and rings, and she tells me through tears it's fine, to please go and answer it. So I do. It is Pete, the actor. Max, rasped Pete. Max, thank God. She said she'll count you as a referral. You have to make her go away. Who? I ask. Annoyance, like an ice pick in my brain, because I already know who. Already suspect. The woman, he bursts, all but sobbing. The one in the chair. I can't believe it. This make-believe lady actually did it. She actually reached out to Pete. Paid him whatever she paid him. Not much, probably. He's an amateur actor we found on Instagram. Honestly, one of the reasons we hired him is because he came cheap. And now he's turned his shtick on me. I sigh. Yeah, very funny. Listen, I know who hired you. She said you'd say that. He bursts. She said you wouldn't believe me, but you have to. Max, you have to. Okay, look, this is inappropriate. My brother-in-law just died. I need to take care of family matters. You have to believe. Max, you're the only one who can save me. You have to believe before tonight. Call her and tell her you believe, or I hang up the phone, frustrated, and then I silence it, as it immediately rings again. My sister looks up from her chair, eyes red, perplexed. Max, she asks. Who was? Nobody. Just an actor I worked with on a gig. Nothing to worry about. I sigh, looking at my silenced phone. It's still ringing. There are also pictures coming through via text and messages. Pictures from the photo shoot. All of the empty chair. Can't you see her? He keeps texting. More empty chair pictures. The man is dedicated. I'll give him that. He's a much better actor than I initially gave him credit. Probably should have paid him more. I block his number and forget about him. Forget about him, that is, until the next day. I'm helping my sister to put things away around the house. The place is a mess, and everything reminds her of Kenji. As I unpack a tote bag on the counter, I pull out a couple of chocolate bars. I ask if I can have one, and she calls from her place, listless on the couch. Yeah, I got those for you. Oh, really? Thank you. Sure. I pull a box of an herbal supplement out. My heart thumps in my chest. This is only a coincidence, I think. I clear my throat and call. What do you want me to do with this herbal concoction? Huh? Supplements for... Looks like it helps with digestion and gut health. Oh, She goes very quiet, and then says, I got that for Kenji. I don't know. Oh, I don't want to ask. I don't want to. And I loathe the butterflies in my stomach, the way my throat is dry and constricted, as I ask her, did you forget the bag? Huh? The herbal medicine. When you were out shopping for him, did you leave the bag? Yeah, actually. She wipes tears from her eyes. I've just been so out of it. How did you know I left it? I don't answer. My heart is hammering now as I go to my phone, search for Pete's number, try to call, but there is no answer. I turn to my sister. Maybe the cashier kept the bag by accident, I say. Maybe they set it behind the counter, so you didn't notice when you walked away. She's too distraught over Kenji to engage with me. Doesn't understand why I care about the bag. Could have been tucked behind the counter, she echoes. I cling to that thought. The make-believe woman bribed the cashier to hide the bag, and then to put items in it that my sister would normally buy. How else would the make-believe woman have known exactly what items would be in there? These scammers, I tell you, blood-sucking. It's insane the lengths they go to. But just in case, I retreat to the spare room, open my laptop, and check the footage of my recording with the make-believe woman. Check the date. She told me I had 5 days. Tomorrow will be 5. I have time. I repeat to myself, wondering why I'm being so uncharacteristically irrational when none of this is real. I paid Pete. I know he's acting. Why the fuck hasn't he called back? I call again. No answer. I go to YouTube and pull up the debauchery and debunkery video I released about Nathan, the phony medium. My heart settles as I watch it. The medium talking about his craft. This fucking fraudster. He goes on about establishing a psychic connection and how time is all wibbly-wobbly. Pretty sure he cribbed that from some sci-fi show. And as a consequence, he can see snippets from the future. It's all nonsense. I feel the comfort of the familiar, my skepticism sliding back into place. The camera shots of my house, the stage front room, the peeling wallpaper, and everything. And there's Pete, sitting on the sofa, pretending. I can't wait for him to get to the part where I call cut. And he reveals he's acting the whole time. That's what I need to see to feel better. Hello, sir. My name is Nathan, says Nathan on screen, introducing himself to Pete. I'm a spiritual medium. Your family reached out to me and asked for my services. Can you tell me some of what you've been experiencing? She's there, says Pete. Who's there? Asks Nathan the medium, while Pete the actor keeps staring and says he doesn't know her name. And then my camera, zooming in on the chair. Number. Fuck me. No. I freeze the frame. Number. What the fuck? Number. She's there, staring out at me from the screen, staring through the screen, right at the camera. The woman from the psychic reading shop. The video proceeds as normal, the same as before, exactly as we recorded. My blood is pumping so loud, I can barely hear myself think. My pulse raging, drowning out the dialogue in the video as the medium leans forward and asks what the woman is doing now. Pete says she's just sitting there. The camera pans back to the empty chair, but it's not empty. The woman is sitting in it. The camera returns to Nathan the medium as he gets up and begins performing a blessing on the room until suddenly Pete sits up straight on the sofa and announces she's getting up. She's laughing. My throat constricts. My heart sledgehammers my ribs so hard I think I might go into cardiac arrest. The phone camera remains trained on Pete, on his hammy acting. Only now, instead of looking hammy, he looks genuinely terrified. He really is a better actor than I gave him credit. I hear my own voice chuckling under my breath on the recording, trying not to giggle at what I evidently thought was a great performance by our actor. And then finally, my phone pans back to the chair. I scream aloud, in my room by myself, and jerk back from my laptop. The woman is standing, lurching toward the camera, toward me. She's coming closer. Pete's voice screams on the recording. I'm cowering on the floor, gasping as the woman steps nearer to the camera, her face swallowing the screen. Cut, shouts my voice. Then everything is back to normal. The woman on the video is gone. There's only Nathan, red-faced and ashamed. As Pete and I tease him, I hear my own arrogant voice. I'm Max, host of Debauchery and Debunkery, where we used to take a shot for each lie, but quickly realized we get drunk way too fast. I slam my hand on the laptop to shut it, but then something occurs to me. If the woman was really there, if I wasn't seeing things, others must have noticed her too. I pull open the laptop again and skim the YouTube comments, all ordinary, and my heartbeat settles until I scroll to the most recent comments. Specifically, there's a bunch left by the user, Pete Hamsitup. It's the handle for our actor, and he has commented over and over, Pete Hamsitup, I believe. 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 I check Pete's Instagram account, the one we hired him from. His account is gone, deleted. I call Pete, and while the phone rings, Max, the door bursts open, and my sister says, Max, everything okay? She's come because she heard me screaming over the video. Can you see her? I ask, trying not to hyperventilate, as I turn my laptop toward her, rewinding the video to just before the cut. Can you see anyone in the chair? What? No, it's just an empty chair. Max, what's going on? But I push past her without answering. I need to get home, need to get to that stage front room. Max, my sister shouts, as I slam the door behind me. I try calling Pete again. As I pull out of the driveway, his phone just keeps ringing. I call and call, then drop the phone, swearing as I nearly pancake a pedestrian. I'm so distraught. The pedestrian screams obscenities as I screech by. My phone rings again, and I pick it up wildly, wondering if it's Pete. But it's my sister, worried about me. I lie that I'm fine, running a red light and careening along residential streets, and finally screeching into my driveway. And I leap out, rushing up the front steps, through the porch, and into the stage living room area. See the chair, still empty. Thank God, everything still the same as on the day of Nathan the medium's visit. Nathan, I need to call Nathan. Nathan, I burst as the call connects. It's Max from Debauchery and Debunkery. I need you to make her stop. I pause, stammering over my next words, and grit my teeth and make myself say, I'll take down the debunk video. I'll say you were right. Just make her stop. Do you believe? Comes the tinny voice on the phone. Sure, fine. Just make her stop. If you believe, says the voice, you must publicly announce your belief before you end yourself and your channel. What? The blood in my veins turns to ice as I remember the deal, that absurd deal. If I believe, I end my channel and myself. If I don't believe, nothing happens. So Max, you'll be fine if you don't believe, says the small, rational voice in my head. If I don't believe, as long as I'm still a skeptic, But tears start into my eyes, the phone shaking in my fingers, because I'm looking at my texts and there's a new one from Pete. Hello, this is Jay on my grandfather's phone. He had a heart attack yesterday and passed away. Scrolling up to the previous text, it's just the picture he sent, over and over again, of the chair. But now, I see her. I fucking see her. And now I can't make myself unsee her. I can't. And I'm certain that when finally I see her in the flesh again and my 5 days are over, I'll end my account and myself. And oh, fuck me. How do I stop it? Please help me. I whimper into the phone. Nathan's voice cackles, only it doesn't sound like Nathan. I sink down to the floor in despair, and that's when I find it on the carpet. That matte black card of hers, black, like the blackest void in the universe. Except those words, make believe, and in the picture of the eye, looking at me and the number. And I remember, she likes referrals. I still have a few hours left to find someone else, so I'm making this final post. Please, are you a skeptic? You think I'm making this all up? That it's just nonsense? That I'm a ha 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 ha? I'm an actor. Ha 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 ha. Perfect. Okay, please, listen. I believe, and I need you to look her up. I need you to call her. Call this number. Redacted. Call her. And no matter how skeptical you are, she'll make you believe. But I beg you to do it soon. Now. Call her now. Now, 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 now. I promise she'll make you believe.
Letter from the girl who watched you grow up. Hi, the first time I saw you, I was surprised I could see you. You had a small turtle in your hands. You kept calling it Michelangelo, which I assumed was a nod to the Ninja Turtles. You tossed your long brown hair behind your back and knelt down to place the turtle on the ground. You were excited to see it wobbling on the grass. It reminded me of my cat and how I used to play with him when I was your age. I witnessed your entire childhood from my small window. Your first ride on a bicycle, your first day of school, your first real friend Brenda, your first day of middle school and the cute uniform you got to wear, the time you won the science fair and you brought home a trophy shaped like a cell. You were such a happy girl. I saw you grow older, your body changing. You grew taller, your body slimmer, your face as beautiful as ever. I witnessed as others started to notice you in a different way. The stares from the jealous girls, the googly eyes from the young boys. As all this happened before my eyes, I noticed myself changing too. I got older. I got weaker. I got disillusioned, bruised. I lost my will to escape my painful life. All I had was this window to your life to keep me going. I lived my days through yours. Watching you was enough entertainment for me. You couldn't know the different ways you saved me from bad thoughts, bad days, and all the pain I had been suffering from. I saw the day that handsome young man came to pick you up in a red convertible. Your mother wasn't happy about it, but she knew she had no choice. You had to start spreading your wings at some point. You left in a gorgeous floral dress that matched the summer's flowers. You came back late that night. You had a stuffed bear and some leftover cotton candy. I imagined you had gone to the fair. I imagined all the rides you must have gone on, all the fun that must have been for you. I was so happy that you had enjoyed your first date. And then came the magical kiss. He leaned in, blushing, and kissed you. Your cheeks were so red that I instantly knew I had witnessed your first kiss. I closed my eyes, imagining what that must have felt like. For 1 second, I imagined it had been me wearing that dress, smiling so big, with butterflies in my belly and a kiss on my lips. But I was happy for you. I wanted to thank you for allowing me to live again, for allowing me to dream again. I wanted to thank you, but just couldn't bring myself to you. I couldn't go talk to you. I didn't know how. If only you knew about my window. And then one day, I heard him talking about you, the man I live with. He noticed you. I heard him complaining about how pretty girls like you shouldn't show off their legs like that. The moment he mentioned your legs, I knew it was over. I knew you would become his next trophy. I had to keep you away from him. This was my chance to thank you. I couldn't let you turn into me. I had been lucky. I don't know why he liked me this much. Most other girls came and went, never to return. And yet, amidst all the years, he always kept me down here. I think it's because he saw that I still had a light in me. Because I had you. All the other girls died long before he killed them. I could tell that they were already dead in their eyes long before he viciously murdered them in front of me, showing off his skill. But not me. You kept me going. I had my little window, a little crack high up on the wall of this basement I call home. He didn't like that he couldn't break me down. He didn't know about the little crack, so he kept me to see how long I could stay like this. It is a sick game that I've been winning thanks to you. But then, He noticed you. And I knew. I knew what fate awaited you if he laid his monstrous hands on you. Whatever strength I have left, I've collected it and prepared myself to finally do something about it. I want to thank you, because if you're reading this letter, it means I did it. I gathered my courage, packed it neatly into action, and went through with my plan to escape once and for all. I will make him believe I've died. I don't know if it'll work, but if it does, he will reach to pick me up. I'll immediately kick him as hard as I can where it'll hurt the most. As hard as I can. I will then steal his keys and run as fast as I can and drop this letter off in your mailbox. I have a feeling he will chase me and get a hold of me eventually because I am weak. I'm very weak, battered. There is barely a human left in this body of mine. But if that is the case, I've been prepared to leave this world for a long time. I doubt anyone will hear or see me. This street is so desolate. You're the only life here, it seems sometimes. But so long as you get this letter, I know that I did my part and that you'll be safe. Monsters are real. This one is named Ryan Morehouse. He is your front door neighbor. I have been kept captive in his basement for a very long time. I've lost track of the years, but I believe I must be in my late 20s by now. I was 15 when he first brought me here. My parents must have looked for me. Please don't tell them about me. I don't want them to know about the tortures he put me through. I don't want them to see me broken down this way. I just want you to report him to the police. His evil nature and depraved mind can only be stopped if he is caught behind bars. They will find bodies dangling in the walls of the basement. I've learned to live with the smell by now, but they will notice it the second they step down here. There are a lot of young girls in the walls of my room down here. Tell them to treat them delicately. They were good girls. They've been my companions, my friends. Most of all, I want to thank you. You're the only thing that kept me going. You were my light. And now, I'm escaping thanks to you. Escaping this awful room. Escaping this awful life. Even if it means I finally get to die. With love, the girl who watched you grow up. We found this letter in our mailbox. After contacting the police, they entered the home of our neighbor across the street. Over a span of 5 days, they found a total of 15 bodies hidden in different parts of his house. He had plans to kidnap our daughter, but thanks to this mysterious stranger, his plan was intercepted. We still have not found the girl who wrote this. We like to think she made it out alive, but sadly, it isn't likely as Ryan Morehouse is also missing. We don't even know her name. But we did find the little crack in the wall, the one where she saw my daughter grow up from. Hi, it's me. It's been a while since I last wrote you. I read on the newspaper that you received my letter. I guess you know about me now. I bet you're wondering who I am, what my given name was, who my parents were, where I lived, where I went to school, what I dreamt of becoming when I'd grow up. I don't know. Maybe you didn't wonder. Maybe I just wished you did. Maybe I just wish someone did. When you're locked away for so long, watching as the world passes by, not taking a second look at the blue house with the man with the fake smile, you start to understand that you don't really matter. You start to understand that the world only cares about the sensationalism and scare factor of a missing teen. They don't really care about the face in the missing poster, and that's when you begin to float. You float when he talks to you. You float when he beats you. You float when he enters you. You float far above it all. I read a long time ago that when you go through a near-death experience, many patients claim to hover above their bodies, watching as doctors and nurses work to save them. They floated. Apparently, this is a mechanism of the brain when it is going through extreme trauma. The event is so inconceivable to the brain that it begins to react in bizarre ways. It becomes detached, or at least pretends to, so that the patient feels safe. Well, I did that. I floated, watching from a distance the things that were happening to me. I guess that's what happens to you when you die a little every day. I guess that's what happens when they kill you a little every day. He was dashing. He was clever. He knew all the words to say. In one single second our paths crossed and he changed my life forever. I can still clearly see that second in slow motion. The way his smile became distorted, the way he twisted my arms, the way my heart sank and drowned. An abduction is a heart-wrenching, soul-destroying transaction between the captor and the abductee. In one single moment, you realize you've made the greatest mistake of your life. You wish you could go back for just one split second. Back to when everything was still all right. Back to when you were still only a naive, innocent child. But you can't. It's over before you even had a chance to process it. And although you always thought you would fight like a beast in a situation like this, and you always thought you would defend your body and mind with every single cell in your body, you don't. Something inside you breaks and you easily become his prisoner. You quickly believe you deserved this for being such a fool. You quickly descend into a madness I wish upon no one. By now you know that I lived in a labyrinth of horrors. My pain seemed eternal. It seemed like purgatory. Sometimes, even now, I wonder if I'm not still there. If all this is just some neurons in my brain creating nicer pathways and showing me the life I wished I had. But there is one thing I always remind myself of when I begin to have these intrusive and deluded thoughts. Children grow up. Maybe I was a young, naive, and easily conquered child once, but even that could not last forever. In the end, children always grow up. But monsters, they always stay monsters. Ryan Morehouse. It's strange to say his name out loud and to no longer be afraid of it. But the strangeness of this new feeling inside me is slowly fading as I realize it was all real. The pain was real. The girls I met were real. He was real. My escape was real. I laid motionless, not breathing, eyes opened, mouth dangling. As he approached me, my body became tense, knowing the things he was capable of. But before he could do anything to me, I floated. The funny, beautiful irony of my story is that he taught me through pain and suffering the one trick that would bring it all to an end. I floated. I flew. As he kicked me that afternoon, I watched from above. But this time, even my physical body didn't react to the pain he inflicted on it. I can't explain to you what happened. Sometimes I think it was some sort of miracle. It was all too perfect. He really thought I had died. I could tell by the shock in his face. I was baffled by all the mistakes he made. I suppose he got used to my powerlessness. But on that day, I had a mission to save you. I couldn't bear to imagine you in his mind, in his hands, in his chambers of torture. As he dropped down to check my pulse, I knew it was over for him. He looked into my dead eyes. He stared intently into them, looking for any sign of life. And then I squinted with a half smile, startling him before I bit down hard into his neck. He never saw my smile coming into his skin. I think it's because he had forgotten what my smile looked like. I never knew I'd enjoy the taste of blood in my mouth so much. As he stumbled to the ground, holding his neck and crying in horror, I stood up. And for once, it was I who looked down at him. For once, it was him who looked up to me. I could see it in his eyes that he knew it was all over. I kicked him in his head until I could no longer recognize him. There was a numbness inside me as I kicked and kicked and kicked. I felt nothing. In the darkness, I drove. I still remembered a bit of my driving lessons I had the year I was abducted. Driving was incredible and freeing. I drove for a long time in his truck. I knew I had to get rid of the car, as the authorities probably would be looking for him and his truck after finding the letter I left you. But I didn't want to be found. I didn't want to speak to anyone. Not the police, not any therapists, not the media frenzy surely waiting for me, not even my family. I was thirsty for a freedom that I had never known, a freedom far away from every single living thing. I made it to the desert and walked out of the car, leaving his body in the back seat. I enjoyed the colors of the sun as it lightly went to sleep for the night. The freedom that I felt inside me was indescribable. It was as if I had been born again. As the stars began to dangle above me, I wondered if you had read my letter. I wondered if you felt safe now. I wondered if you were thinking about me. But mostly I missed you and it made me anxious. As I enjoyed my freedom in the desert, I heard something coming from behind me. I looked over my shoulder and felt his eyes on me. I quickly turned around as he laughed, blood spilling from his mouth. He really did resemble a monster now. "Did you really think I would be this easy to kill, you stupid cunt?" He laughed, wiping his deformed mouth. "Did you really think I didn't know you weren't dead? Even I have survived worse beatings than that, you fucking fool," I retorted, slowly smiling again. "Monsters are funny. They always forget that there can be monsters hidden in pretty little things too." I pulled his gun from my pocket and shot both of his feet. He fell to the ground once again, crying in pain. "I'm not a kid anymore," I said, watching him recoil to the ground. "I'm not a woman either," I paused, my voice changing. "I'm not really even human." "I'm not. I am what he made me. I am this thing that can't feel correctly. I am this thing that can float. I am this thing that has learned to accept severe pain. I am this thing, and I've come to accept it. But I don't think the rest of the world would. I won't lie to you. Ryan Morehouse and I, we still live together. Please don't feel bad for me. It is I who chose this. I can't help but feel that only he truly knows me now. Only he knows me in this deformed, twisted version of myself. Only he can understand me because I am what he made me. But he knows. He knows that it's my turn now. He knows that there is nothing he can do about it. He understands that he must serve me now, and that he doesn't have a choice but to be powerless and helpless like I once was. With time, he will learn how to float too. I wanted to write you this letter to give you a proper thank you. Thank you for always being there for me. Through that small crack, that small hole in the wall of the basement, I saw you grow up in your front yard. I saw you shine. It is what truly kept me going. Your beauty, your innocence, your kindness, your wit all made me live longer just so that I could watch you for one more day. It was like watching my favorite TV show, and I didn't want to miss one single episode. So thank you for that glimmer of hope that kept me going through all those years that I was held captive. It makes me eternally happy to know that you'll never know the horrors of that unforgiving basement. It makes me happy to see you on your journey. It makes me happy to know that you've put the fear of Ryan Morehouse behind you. I'm ecstatic that you've chosen criminal justice as your major. I like to believe that I had a little influence in that. I love the way you've decorated your dorm room. I also love what you've done with your hair. When the sunlight hits it just right, the highlights make you look like an actual angel. You might be wondering how I know all of this. Well, I wanted to admit something to you. I still get panic attacks. I still get horrendous flashbacks, and I end up almost drowning in my own sweat at night. So I've done what I've always done to reduce my anxiety. I still watch you. Last night, I had one of the worst flashbacks since I escaped. I could feel him inside me. It was physically painful. So I ran out of my house and drove over to spend some time with you. Watching you sleep made it all go away. The way your chest rhythmically moved up and down brought a calm over me that I've only known when watching you. I apologize that I still have not physically introduced myself to you. I'm just not ready to come out to the world yet. I still have some things to do with Ryan Morehouse before I can reveal myself. But do know one day, as all monsters do, Ryan Morehouse will expire from this world. And perhaps only then will I be truly free. Free to come and introduce myself to you. And maybe then we can be real friends. Maybe then you can accept me for who I am. In the meantime, thank you for your help in my time of need. I'll see you soon. With all my heart, the girl who watches you from afar. 6 months ago, we received a letter. It was a bittersweet moment. We rejoiced as we realized our daughter was saved from a horrific man. But we were saddened to find out that we had lived in front of a house where many young girls had been held captive and murdered. Most of all, we prayed that we could find the anonymous girl who left us the letter. Although we received many messages asking us for an update, we were asked by the detectives and agents not to share information as the investigation was active and ongoing. Normally, I would respect the wishes of law enforcement. However, I find myself in a difficult position. I truly believe the public should know about the dangers that hide behind pretty little houses in pretty little neighborhoods. It is nauseating and petrifying. This is why I've chosen to share it all. The first time we received a letter from the victim, we were thankful for the writer, for the girl. But this second letter has left us shocked and frightened. Once again, we are left with unknowns. The unknown of whether our daughter is now being followed by a stranger, the unknown of the mental state of this stranger, and the unknown identity of the girl who watched our daughter grow up. The previous tenant left a survival guide. Some families are more dysfunctional than others. My brain hurt trying to process the things I'd learned. Derek had never mentioned his family or that he, by blood, had a claim to the building. He was always so in tune with it made sense, but it was never something I'd considered. I woke on the sofa that morning confused. I had no idea how to continue. The vine had grown almost the entire perimeter of the flat, carefully weaving between my furniture and appliances, its waxy exterior reflecting sunlight from the windows. It stopped at the bedroom door, not crossing the threshold to Jamie's prison. I bit the bullet and decided to call Terry. I hadn't spoken to her since her and the kids' visit a few days prior, and I wanted to see if she remembered Derek ever talking about his brother, or if she knew of any basement. Terry had grown up in the building. She was bound to have explored more thoroughly than Mr. Prentice. Before I could get onto any of that, I owed her an apology. My interaction with her had been rude, and I had been too distracted to check on her the past few weeks. I had been a terrible friend. I hit dial on video chat and waited for a response. When she picked up the phone, she looked even worse than she had the last time I saw her. The dark circles were beginning to look like deep, inky tattoos, permanently stained on her face. Still, she smiled, just like she always did. "Terry, are you okay? I'm so sorry about the other day. I was just..." "It's fine, Kat. I understand. Everything with Ms. Beckman must have brought back some tough feelings for you. I should have waited a day or two. I'm sorry." My heart melted as she spoke. I'd never had such a loyal and genuine friend. "Thank you. Don't be sorry. It helped seeing you guys. How are you doing?" I asked. "I'm okay. The kids aren't behaving great at night. I'm not sure if lockdowns got to them or something else. I have to watch everything that they do. The other day I caught Eddie trying to take apart the washing machine with his claws. By the time I stopped him, Ellie had ripped up the shower curtains trying to climb them." She sounded defeated, and at best, definitely not okay. "I wish I were allowed to help. I miss you." I sighed, longing for the day I could sit and drink tea with her. "Are you okay, Kat?" "You haven't been yourself," she asked. We may not have known each other that long, but she could sense when things weren't right. Terry was the epitome of an empath. This, I'd come to realize over the months, had been the only reason she kept in touch with Prudence. She's just so damn nice. "I'm not. I don't know if you know about Essie's predictions, but she made one for me, and it sent me to some strange places. I'll tell you more when I figure it out, but for now, I need your help." I still chose to omit Jamie from my confessions, but I was ready to be a bit more open. I wasn't too ashamed to admit I needed help. Terry clearly knew about Essie's gift. She didn't bat an eyelid. "Anything. Do you remember Derek ever mentioning a brother, even when you were growing up?" I asked. "Not at all. Derek was always on his own, just appearing when we needed him. I was really young when he first disappeared, though, so I don't remember him well, and might not be the one to ask." Terry's face scrunched up in thought as she racked her brain. "I'm going to send you something." I minimized the video chat and copied the photo from the email onto my phone and sent it to her by text. Her video paused for a moment as she did the same to check the attachment. "He was the first to live here, Terry. His dad built the place." Terry's video clicked back on. "Where did you find this?" she asked. I explained the blog and why I had been looking. It wasn't a short explanation, so I'll spare you that. We even broke from the seriousness briefly for the kids to come and fawn over the kittens. Eddie loved Mr. Meow, whilst Ellie wanted to kidnap Tetley. Wrinkles just curled up with me. He was my secret favorite anyway. Terry was fascinated by the vine. She wondered if it had a connection to Derek, especially given the photo I'd found on my search. I can't say the thought hadn't crossed my mind either. I learned more about him every day, but he would always first and foremost be the gardener. The vine made sense, but the basement didn't. I was struggling to connect it to the brothers. I don't know about a basement, Cat, but if this place is as old as you say, then who knows? I know I may look haggard. She pulled on her cheeks and giggled. But I'm really not that old. I laughed. I was sad that she didn't have any more information, but it was nice to just talk to a friend. For 5 minutes, life felt normal. I'd kept my secret, and talking to Terry, I'd almost managed to forget about Jamie myself. If it hadn't been for the deep bite wound on my finger from the feeding the day before, and the open cuts on my chest from his attack, I might have been successful. I still had no idea what the riddle Essie had given to me meant. I was looking as hard as I could, and it had led me down a rabbit hole that just kept spewing more questions. What I did know was that with Jamie's seemingly permanent change in demeanor, I was running out of time. The growling hadn't stopped. The look of pure hatred as I dropped in food didn't end, and I was getting frightened. Something had to give. Either Jamie was going to die, or I would. There wasn't another option I could see, and the former may have been entirely unachievable. Derek destroyed Lila, but he never returned after. Prudence claimed she killed the original wave of creatures by setting light to them all on the already burnt-out 9th floor. Again, something entirely unachievable without Derek's presence. I had to find him. I said my goodbyes to Terry, promised that I would update her when and if I could, and left to do my daily errands for Mr. Prentice and the couple next door. As I left for the exit, I spotted a man going into Ms. Beckman's flat. I recognized him as the son that I'd always seen visiting, eyes glazed with tears. Terry had said that she would get Molly to inform Essie's family, but I couldn't imagine what Molly might have said happened. I should have gone to him, just as a human being tried to comfort him, but I couldn't bring myself to do it without an explanation to offer. I promised myself that I would visit him when lockdown was over, and I knew why his mother was gone. I rushed out and completed my errands as quickly as possible, eager to get home. Even having the name Albert Miles might have been helpful if I just kept digging on the internet. After I dropped the bags off at Percy and Sylvia's door, I turned the key in my own, entered and shut it behind me like I always would. That was where the normality ended, and my life was disrupted by an uninvited guest. When I turned to face the flat and caught a glimpse of my fold-out table, there was a tall figure stood right next to it. Albert, like Derek, was a little older than he had been in the photo. There was a family resemblance, but the eyes weren't the same. Albert's weren't warm and kind. They were cold and filled with malice. He wore a suit, similar to the one in the picture, but it wasn't as sharp. It was covered in a thick layer of dust and tattered, with loose threads hanging everywhere, like clothes that had been dug out of a box in the attic. He grinned at me. It was smug, like something you might expect from a slimy car salesman. It's been a long time since I had to visit any of the residents up here. I like what you've done with the place. Much more modern than when that old bent before you lived here. I was frozen to the spot. I hadn't been alarmed when his brother had appeared inches from me on a bench, but something about Albert was much more sinister. The thought of his son, dead on the balcony, played on repeat in my mind. "Why are you here?" I asked. He laughed. The smug grin extended across his cheeks. "I like you. You didn't even pretend not to know who I am. You know, Kat, I've always appreciated a person who cuts the small talk. It's better in business and in life. That trait will hold you in good stead." He was animated as he spoke, gesticulating wildly. "You didn't answer my question. Don't you find that ironic considering your sentiment?" I answered back, still terrified, but figuring that keeping him talking might somehow help the situation. "I don't need to answer your question. You know why I'm here." He continued to grin, raising an eyebrow and adjusting the torn sleeves of his suit. "It's not often that I've come across a tenant that causes as much chaos as you do. It's usually issues with the rent, and even something like that hasn't happened for quite some time. But you are something special." He stamped on part of the vine that was growing near his feet, and I watched as the enormous structure withered and shrunk in size, as if it were in notable pain. The beginning of my entire ordeal flooded back to me. I was back in my kitchen, discovering Prudence's note for the first time, reading the one rule that I'd never learned anything more about. 1. The landlord will never bother you. He doesn't visit, call, or communicate in any way. But make sure to pay your rent in a timely fashion always. I have only dealt with him once in 35 years, and let's just say I never missed another rent day. Any repairs required, you speak to the agent you rented the place with. Rule number 1. So much happened that I hadn't thought much about that rule, but there must have been a reason she put it first, before even mentioning the creatures. Suddenly, the literal monster in my closet seemed soft and fluffy in comparison to the ageless man stood in front of me. I've paid my rent. Why are you here? I stood firmly, curling my shaking hands into fists. It was more for comfort than aggression. On the surface, I was hoping it would appear I was standing my ground. The rent part was true. It was hard, but I always found a way. I was still training to teach and pulled in extra cash running after school clubs as I trained. Even during lockdown, I was creating digital learning tools. This place was my home, and I'd followed the first rule to the letter to keep it. Maybe you aren't as bright as I thought. He rolled his eyes. Let's list reasons a landlord might want to visit, shall we? Damage to property, unauthorized modification of communal spaces, digging around where it's not wanted or needed, nurturing my brother's unnatural experiments. He went to continue, but I stopped him. What do you mean, unnatural experiments? Albert laughed even harder than before. I could see in his eyes that he considered me entirely dense by this stage. You think those 3 little abominations you took in came out of nowhere? They were a cry for help, you stupid girl, like a flare, and all you could do was pick it up and let it burn your fingers. He scoffed, laughing at his own bad joke. My heart sunk, wondering where the kittens were and if he'd hurt them. After all the trouble you caused when he helped you last time, I wasn't going to let my idiot brother continue to roam my halls, especially not after what you did once he was gone. I gulped. I knew exactly what he was talking about. He knew that I knew as well. Albert was more than a few steps ahead of me. I realized that Prudence destroying his garden had probably never banished Derek at all. He had been kept prisoner by the man in front of me. If Albert could keep someone with Derek's knowledge and abilities trapped, then I didn't stand a chance. Shall we talk about that thing you keep in your bedroom, Kat? I didn't mean to. I'm so sorry. I've regretted it since. I stuttered. I felt a tear run down my cheek as I anticipated imminent death. I know that. You wouldn't have even known how if my brother had never told the last woman. And he pretends to be so pious. The smile on his face had disappeared. Even the thought of Derek left him with a scowl. He just tried to help the residents here. Please, I made a mistake. I protested, anticipating that I was about to die, or even worse. Albert didn't speak. He just huffed in frustration and turned to walk towards the bedroom. I followed him, trying not to stay too close. The floor was trailed with blood, and as he entered the room, I noticed the wardrobe door was practically shattered. You couldn't even contain your mistake properly. He gestured to Jamie, who was in the corner, hunched over the blood-smothered body of a kitten that he was crunching on the bones of. Tiny bits of muscle and skin in pools of blood littered the floor. His eyes were beady and black. Any semblance of Jamie I'd once seen in them was gone. I noticed Tetley and Wrinkles shivering together in the opposite corner, trying to hide from the monster. The brief relief I felt that they hadn't all met the same fate was interrupted when Jamie started to growl at Albert, baring his crimson-splashed teeth as menacingly as he could. I watched in horror as Albert just stood there, staring at the increasingly angry beast. The creature I had been hiding for all these months lunged at him aggressively, claws outstretched. Albert wasn't fazed. He barely even moved a muscle, just reached out a tattered sleeve and waited for Jamie to make contact with his hand. The second Jamie touched Albert, he let out the most almighty, inhuman scream you could imagine. It felt like my eardrums were about to burst, and I instinctively put my hands over them. Albert put his hand back down by his side as Jamie fell in a heap to the floor. He wasn't moving. Not like when I'd stabbed him with the poker. He wasn't just still, he was dead still. The heap of fur he had become started to morph on the floor. His jaw pulled inwards as if it were dislocating, and his limbs began to stretch and shed their fur. After a while, Jamie was laid there on the floor. Not the rat Jamie, the real one. The one I'd spent years with and searched for a home with. The one who knew me before all this shit ever happened. And he was dead too. For real this time. It took everything I had not to throw myself on the floor with him. I stopped myself multiple times, but Albert's eyes bore into my soul and rendered me unable to move a muscle. I tried to fight back tears, but I couldn't. Don't bother to cry. He died a long time ago. Albert kicked Jamie's corpse and bent down into a squat to get closer to him, not taking his eyes off me. I didn't let him out if that's what you were thinking. No, Cat. You did when you locked an angry animal in a cage. Eventually they all get free. I whimpered a little as he inspected the remains of my boyfriend, intensely taking in his hair and eyes. My brother had this preconceived notion that humans can live in harmony with the evil that inhabits this building. He's wrong, Cat. We can't. Eventually it drives us all mad. Your mistake made such an unusual racket, I had to come and see what was going on. Did you ever imagine keeping him like that before you lived here? Of course not. I tried to interject, but he wouldn't let me. He was in full-blown monologue. This place fucks us up, Cat. You can't make it any better, regardless of how many shrubs you plant outside. He stroked Jamie's cold, dead face gently, barely touching it with his fingertips. The body evaporated beneath them, becoming nothing more than a pile of dust on my carpet. I hadn't even got to touch him, one last time. Albert stood back up, salesman grin plastered back on his face, and brushed his sleeves. I've cleaned up your mistake. Aren't you going to say thank you? I held back the bile that was forming in my throat, took a deep breath, and summoned every ounce of strength that I could just to speak. He was right, this place had fucked me up. But losing your partner like that would do the same to anyone. I thought of the little boy in the mirror, Mr. Prentice, even Ellie and Eddie. This wasn't for me. You're wrong about this place. Not everything here is evil. I made a mistake, but it's you that's evil. You killed your own son. What I did came from love. I blurted, trying to organize my thoughts. You don't know a damn thing about my son, and you won't. This is your only warning, Cat. Stop digging into my family. Consider my brother dead and keep quiet. He spoke sternly. I didn't dare try to talk back again. Despite knowing I'd hit a nerve, everything about him set me on edge. He took another vicious stamp on part of the vine as he exited the bedroom. It shriveled entirely underneath his dusty dress shoes, back to the size that it had been when I pulled my foot free, except it wasn't green anymore. It was brown and rotten. He turned to me once more before he reached the front door of the flat to leave and spoke. If you dare continue your pointless little mission to try and find Derek, you will meet the same fate as that blind old bat from down the hall. People here will always do as I tell them. Let her be an example of why not to meddle in my family business. Feel lucky that I didn't eviscerate you on the spot, or worse. He winked at me, knowing that he had complete control of the situation, and left with a simple, "Bye for now, Cat." As the door slammed, the two remaining kittens bounded to my feet, shaking with fear. I scooped them up despite the burning and held them close. I wasn't going to let anything happen to them. The flat had an emptiness I wasn't used to, even when it had been just me with no kittens. Before I repeated the ritual to bring Jamie back as a creature, there was the comforting knowledge that he existed somewhere. There was hope. The pile of dust on my bedroom floor and the shattered remains of my wardrobe were all I had left of him now. Then there were Mr. Meow's remains, a glaring reminder of my failure to keep anything alive or safe. I cried for him as I scooped his parts into a shoebox ready to bury in the garden the next day. It was all my fault. Jamie, Mr. Meow, Esther, they were all dead because of me. I considered calling Terry back, telling her what happened, but I decided to keep my mouth shut. My stupidity had already cost lives, and I wasn't prepared to risk her or the kids. They really were family to me. I wasn't about to give up, though. All the heartache I'd caused, the tears of Essie's son, and the months my boyfriend spent trapped in the body of a vile beast, maybe they wouldn't be in vain if I was able to save Derek from his brother. The empty, gaping grief that I felt left me perfectly accepting of the prospect of a suicide mission. I cuddled the kittens and felt the skin of my arms start to melt and sizzle. If they really were a cry for help, I had to listen. I just couldn't let it go. There's a death row inmate who we've executed over a dozen times. He won't stay dead. We killed Joseph Glass for the first time on August 18th, 1999. I knew he was a strange case since day one. Never seen a guy so happy to die before. It was like we were doing him a favor. He refused the automatic appeal. He refused to be seen by a chaplain. He just wanted it over with. It had only taken a little over a year, and it was already time for him to make his appointment with God. He freaked me out just passing by his cell. He was like our very own Hannibal Lecter, the way he just stood there in the back of his cell like he'd been waiting for you. The lights always burned out in any cell he was in, and maintenance had gotten tired of fixing them. Not that he seemed to mind in the slightest. The darkness seemed to swallow his top half, and all I could see were the whites of his beady little eyes poking out of all that black. Billy drummed his baton against the bars. "Up and at 'em, cowpoke," he called in that mocking tone. "Time finally come for you to pay what you owe, you sick son of a—" Billy. Warden Taft silenced him with a word. "If you can't act like a professional, you're going to have to sit this one out." Billy paused and licked his chapped lips. "Nah," he muttered. "This is a show I can't miss." Glass seemed to tick Billy off more than any prisoner before him. He liked him to at least pretend to feel sorry for what they've done, or act scared of what's coming to him. This one didn't even have the common decency to shed a tear. He was as stone-faced as a statue, even while being marched to the chair. Billy liked to joke sometimes that we ought to take the guy out back with some car batteries and really put the fear of God into him, get him to cut out that stoic act. I think he was only half joking. After what this guy did to those girls, well, Billy has a daughter, so I guess it struck a chord. We all watched him fry. The warden, his closest men, the thin-faced man representing the commissioner of corrections, the prison physician, the families of those poor girls. It couldn't have gone more by the book. Only oddity I'd noticed at the time was that the stench of death never quite left the clothes I'd worn that day. And then the next morning, we came into work to see the whites of those beady little eyes staring at us from the darkness again. "Good morning, sirs," he said, just as he did every morning in that airy, hoarse little voice. I'll admit it. I dropped everything I was carrying, stumbled back, stammered like a confused child. Hell, I almost screamed. You're not... You're supposed to be..." "I don't know what you mean, sir." He leaned in like he was trying to stare a hole through my chest. His tone almost sounded disappointed. "You never came for me. You promised me that yesterday would be the end, sir, but you never came. I waited all night long. Why did you lie to me?" Me and Taft looked at each other. We both had the exact same question on our minds. If Glass was still alive, who the hell did we roll into the morgue last night? "Jesus Christ," Taft gagged when he pulled back the cadaver cover, stumbling away. "It's Billy." I looked. I know I shouldn't have, but I couldn't help it. And I'll be forever haunted by the sight of my friend lying there on his back, mouth agape and cloudy eyes staring into the ceiling, open wide as if he'd spent his last moments in a state of terror. The public never found out what happened. The cover-up story was that poor Billy had been taken by cardiac arrest. Internally, it was the scandal to end all scandals. Worst case of incompetence and negligence in history, they called it. They brought the hammer down on anyone even tangentially involved. Me and Taft were out on our ears, and they would have prosecuted us too, but that would have required admitting it ever happened. But I just could never wrap my head around it. Of those dozens of witnesses, not a single person noticed we were strapping a guard to the chair, not an inmate. It was impossible to the point of absurdity. Glass had been the man in that chair. I'd never been more certain of anything in my life. Some months later, I noticed power flickering off all over the city one evening. It was brief, so I thought nothing of it, at least until I got a call from a familiar number the very next morning. "I understand you were one of the staff who regularly worked with one Joseph Glass. We would like to consult with you about an evolving situation." Oh. At 7 p.m. yesterday, we attempted the execution of Joseph Glass for the second time. There was a long pause, and when the voice returned, the professionalism had melted away, replaced with a baffled anxiety. And well, it didn't work. I blinked. It didn't... What? There came a long sigh. Perhaps it'd be best if you saw for yourself. And just like that, me and Taft had our jobs back. Officially, Joseph Glass had been successfully executed on August 18, 1999. Unofficially, they'd tried again 6 months later, just to tie up loose ends. This time, he hadn't even had the courtesy to pretend to die. He just sat there on the chair, motionless and unaffected, while the CO who'd flipped the switch suddenly seized up and began to convulse, screaming and gnashing and wailing as electricity seared him beneath his skin, clawing at his chest until his eyes popped in his skull and rolled down his face like melted candle wax. All around him, lights flickering, machines bursting from pressure, electrical panels vomiting arcs of static. It was a mess. The feds were crawling all over this case now from a department I've never heard of. Something about investigating preternatural activity. They told me Glass was refusing to speak with anybody but the COs who'd once cared for him. Being walked into that interrogation room almost made me feel like I, myself, was a convict being marched to his execution. Glass was staring at me when I walked in, like he'd been sat there, motionless, waiting for me. I expected nothing less. I took a shuddering breath as I sat across from him. I'd sat across from serial killers and psychos before and showed no hint of fear, but how could I not now sitting across from a man who can kill people without touching them? Glass. Officer Mendez. His tone betrayed no emotion. I had thought you'd abandoned me. I winced. Number no, Glass. I'd just been temporarily relieved. It's good to see you again. Would you like a glass of water? I offered it to him. He didn't even look at it. His eyes just bored into mine, relentless. I'm here to ask you a few questions. Silence. Okay, Glass, I need to know how you killed Billy and Kramer. I didn't, he replied. It did. It? The thing standing behind you. I didn't bother to turn around. I had enough experience with prisoners trying to trick me into looking the other way while they pulled off some half-baked escape plan. Glass, please, let's take this seriously, I replied. I've always treated you with respect, haven't I? You've never had any problems with me. Actually, I do. I have a problem with all of you. Oh? You here all believe that death is a punishment. There was the first hint of emotion I'd ever heard in his voice. It's not. It's freedom. The only freedom. You promised me that gift. You promised me you'd let me die. You've given it to so many other prisoners while leaving me behind. With all of your machines and your science and your knowledge, surely you can find a way, if anyone. My throat felt suddenly dry. I had to take a sip of the water myself and hoped it would quell my burning nerves. We're trying our best, Glass, but you have to work with us. It may help if you told us what exactly is preventing us from executing you. He moved for the first time, leaning in so slow as to be almost imperceptible. It won't let me die. And that's when I felt a hand settle on my shoulder from behind. Everything stopped. My lungs stopped inflating. I swear my heart stopped beating, and my blood froze in place in my veins, and it all felt so cold. I could see the hand in the corner of my eyes, long and veiny and black. I could feel the breath on the back of my neck. I'd once mocked the way deers froze in headlights. Now I understood. I couldn't move, I couldn't blink, I couldn't think. I couldn't even take a single breath. Even as my lungs began to cry out for air, and my vision blurred, and my thoughts melded together. All I could see was Joseph's eyes staring into mine. Those infinite fathoms of darkness, that Stygian sea that swirled and stormed and thundered in the blackness of his iris, and the eyes of things waiting a million leagues below the waters. And I would have suffocated there, too terrified to even breathe, If those agents in black had not called off the interrogation then and come storming into the room. Later, they showed me the tapes from the security camera. There'd been nothing behind me. Nothing placing its thin hand upon my shoulder, nothing at all. On May 7th, 2001, Glass was set to be executed for the third time, via hanging, or so I heard, in some government black site somewhere, far from prying eyes. While it was set to happen, me and Taft were sharing glasses of scotch in his office, nominally to celebrate. Really, because we were scared. Taft always struck me as young at heart despite his years, but this was the first time the warden had ever looked truly, properly old. He watched the yard below as he had a drink. Did I ever tell you why I chose this line of work, Mendez? I shook my head, and he sighed. Back in '63, they found a woman's body in the back seat of a burnt-out car in some state park near my neighborhood. A prostitute. One of her Johns had chopped her up, burned all the evidence. And you know what got me, Mendez? Nobody cared. Nobody bothered to investigate. Who will notice one less hooker on the corner of Fifth Avenue, right? It didn't sit right with me. The way I see it, Mendez, every life matters. Even the ones we try and cast aside. Everybody's got people who love them, and childhood memories, and all that. Everybody deserves justice, no matter who they were. He set down his glass and looked me in the eyes. So I joined the force, got the case reopened, found the guy, and I watched him fry. And I like to imagine she was there watching too as he burned. There was a tense moment, and then a chuckle. Of course, after that bullet to the hip in '71, I couldn't walk the beat anymore. But I've been just as happy here, watching justice be served. It makes me feel like there's some kind of karmic order to the world. Good deeds and bad deeds get repaid in kind. It was clear there was something lurking beneath his words, some unspoken thesis. Eventually, with old, wrinkled, tired eyes, he said it. I've thought about it, and if Glass doesn't die tonight, I'm finally going to retire, Mendez, he confessed. After what he did to those girls, what kind of order can there be in a world where a monster like that is just beyond justice? I was shocked. Warden Taft always struck me as an unmoving fixture. What would we do without him? He'll die, sir, I promised. It'll work this time, it has to. But he seemed deeply uncertain. With one last shuddering drink, he leaned forward. His eyes. He stared at my expression, as if desperate for me to understand, for me to know. Those things in his eyes, haven't you seen them? And at that moment, Taft was yanked up out of his chair. It was so sudden, so inexplicable, I could barely register what I was witnessing. Some unseen force lifted him 2 or 3 feet above the ground, dangling him there. He choked, coughed, and sputtered, desperate to gasp down air which would not come, and clawed at something around his neck which I could not see. He was hanging, I realized, and with wide, horrified eyes, the same as Billy's had been, he silently begged me for help. I sprang from my chair and wrapped my arms around his dangling legs. At first I tried to pull him down to the floor, but I realized it was only tightening the invisible noose around his neck. Then I tried lifting him as high as I could, which gave him some relief, but not much. Tears rolled down his face as it swelled and turned blue. And even though I could not see the noose, I could see the bruised purple skin where it had squeezed around his neck. All the while, I screamed myself hoarse. "Help! Somebody, please! Jesus Christ, we need help in here!" But nobody came. And all of a sudden, some unseen force seemed to sweep my feet out from under me. I dropped like a bag of bricks, but I was so startled I maintained my grip around the warden's legs. I fell and yanked him down with me, and his body suddenly jolted with a sickening crack. It took me a while to manage the courage to look up at him. His neck had been stretched far too long, and his head was bent to the side at almost a 90-degree angle. Eyes wide, round, and bloated tongue hanging from dry lips. And then whatever force had suspended him disappeared, and his body fell upon me while I screamed and screamed. I came bursting from his office to find my co-workers casually chatting and working just outside. Somehow, despite all my screaming and begging while Taft was dying, none of them had heard a thing. I took a page from Taft. I wanted out. We were dealing with something unholy here, something whose tendrils could reach any distance, and my life, who knows, maybe even my soul, was at hazard. But the agents in the sharp suits made one thing clear. If I refused to cooperate, well, I would make the perfect scapegoat for the murder of Warden Taft. I was marched into the interrogation room to find a Joseph Glass that had abandoned all pretense of humanity. His eyes had darkened to a pure black, or perhaps he had no eyes at all, only windows into some place of outer darkness. I was shaking like a leaf as I sat in front of him, feeling more like a prisoner than he was. Mr. Glass. No reply. I shuddered, trying to focus on my little piece of paper to distract myself from the blackness of his eyes. I have some questions I'm supposed to ask you. Is that okay? Silence. I take a deep breath. How old are you, Glass? I thought it was just one of those basic questions. Conversation starters, really. I couldn't have prepared myself for his answer. I am old, child. His voice was nothing like I remembered. It was deep and low and rumbling, like there were multiple people speaking in unison, and all were equally ancient. Older than you could possibly know. Older than this nation, and older even than the empire that once bore it. I had to fight the basic animal instinct to flee. Focus on the questions, I thought. Why did you do what you did to those girls? Just so I could feel something again, he whispered. Anything. Did you not feel the slightest bit of guilt? Remorse? You ask that of me? Me who has watched empires rise and fall. He almost sounded amused. Does time feel remorse? For time has killed far more than I. But mankind is like the Hydra. All I've killed will be replaced by, essentially, identical stock, and in greater numbers. And then they will die and be replaced. And so the cycle will continue forever. Did you expect me to pity them for being given the death I myself covet? Only the dead are given leave of the cycle. It is a blessing. And suddenly, he stood from his chair, as if he'd never been restrained at all. A blessing you promised me, Officer Mendez. I stared up at him in disbelief. How did you... But I couldn't even stammer a sentence out before he was upon me, crawling over the table with the eerie grace of a spider. These were no longer the imperceptible hints of emotions I'd come to expect. It was like a switch had been flipped. Tears streamed down his cheeks, snarling with genuine rage, hurt, betrayal. And beneath those black seas in his eyes, all the things that haunted the fathoms below were rising to the surface. You owe me a death. Make good on your word. Pay your debt. I cried out and recoiled from his every touch with disgust, but he was stronger than he looked. I couldn't worm my way out of his impossible grip. I won't. Get off of me, you sick bastard. Do it. Pay me what you owe. It was like 1,000 different voices screaming in my ear. Straining and weeping, I locked my hands around his neck and pressed my thumbs against his throat, trying to strangle him. But instead, I could just feel that grip upon my own neck, squeezing the life out of myself as my lungs burned for air. Yet I kept pressing harder and harder, as if hoping I might somehow break through whatever unholy force was protecting him. And then those terrible hands grasped my shoulders again, and I was paralyzed by a terror that could be called nothing but ancient and primal. Like the thing standing behind me was the same force that had kept my ancestors huddled terrified in their caves 100,000 years ago, and every one of those voices was crying out to me through my very blood, and it pulled me from my chair, threw me as though I were weightless, and the next thing I knew, I was waking up in the infirmary. Once more, none of this was captured on the security camera. In the footage, I just enter the room and have a seat with strange, almost robotic movements. And then the both us just sit there, staring at each other without speaking, without moving, without blinking, for an hour. After this, Joseph Glass entered a catatonic state, and from then on refused to converse with even me. Now that my usefulness had ended, the agents discarded me like yesterday's trash. Don't even seem to care if I tell anybody. Who would believe me? I thought I'd gotten lucky, that my nightmare was over. I couldn't have been more wrong. Go sorting through any public records and you won't find a single mention of the name Joseph Glass. They've squirreled him away in that off-the-books black site and scrubbed away every other trace of him. I'd say he'd been unpersoned, if indeed he could ever be called a person at all. But they're still trying every execution method in the book. I don't know quite why. Maybe it's for research. I'm sure the US military would love to find the secret to making its men as unkillable as glass. And besides, they're not the ones who have to deal with the consequences. On June 3, 2005, they tried a firing squad. I know this because me and my wife were out on our second honeymoon, slow dancing by the lake at night to our favorite song, when I felt a wetness against my chest. I looked down to see her eyes as gray and dull as foggy glass, and her chest shredded to Swiss cheese by rounds that made no sound. On December 23, 2012, they tried lethal injection. That was the day they found my son's car wrapped around a tree, and baffled coroners discovered that he was dead before the accident even occurred, his bloodstream polluted with pavilon and potassium chloride. It's been years since I've isolated myself from everyone I knew, hermiting away in this cabin out in the middle of nowhere. And yet the stench of death still follows me. Just a couple years ago, I found a news report mentioning my nephew. Apparently, he'd been found completely exsanguinated, his veins emptied utterly despite no signs of a struggle. God knows what kind of arcane methods of execution they're trying by now. He's not going to let me walk away from this. Not while I still owe him a debt. But I've been doing some research too. Research into those untold legions of things I witnessed staring up from that blackened sea in Glass's eyes. I've learned things men were not meant to know. Practiced rites, assembled tools, ingredients. And I think I know where they're keeping him. Even though they blindfolded me, I counted the second between every turn on our way to the black site, and I've since spent weeks watching the place, cataloging every entry point. Maybe I'm slipping into madness, or maybe I've truly found the way to put an end to the horror, to finally give this monster the justice that Taft would have wanted for him. Joseph Glass had been right about one single thing. I have to pay what I owe, even if it kills me. The first, she told me in response to my asking about her most traumatic calls. She shook her head and told me that really bad calls happen more frequently on the mountain, since the potential for nasty accidents is higher. About 5 years ago, one of the parks she worked at had a string of disappearances. It was a bad year, she said, one of the worst on record as far as weather went. They were getting about a foot of new snow every couple of days, and there were a few avalanches that killed some climbers. They'd warned people about staying on the mapped areas, but of course there's always those who don't listen. In one particularly nasty case, an entire family got wiped out because the father decided he knew better than the officials, and he took them out into an area that wasn't safe. They were snowshoeing, and as best KD could figure, they'd walked onto a shelf of snow that looked solid, but actually wasn't. It gave way, and this family went ass over tea kettle almost 300 feet down a slope. They landed on the rocks at the bottom, and the parents died instantly. One of the kids did as well, but the other two survived. One had a broken leg and fractured ribs. The other was almost unharmed, save for some bruising and a sprained ankle. The uninjured child left his sibling behind and set out to find help. KD said the kid didn't make it more than half a mile before a storm overtook him. Kid stopped to try and get warm, or maybe just to rest, and ended up freezing to death. They ended up finding the family with the help of some witnesses who saw them heading out into the wilderness, and she was the one to find the kid who'd frozen to death looking for help. She said it had started to snow, just enough to obscure long-distance vision, but not enough to make searching impossible. She saw a figure sitting in the snow up ahead, and she got to it as quickly as possible. She described in detail how, as she got closer, she realized first that it was a child, second that they were deceased, and third that they had frozen in one of the most pitiful positions she's ever found a corpse in. The kid was sitting upright, with his knees tucked up against his chest. His arms were curled around them, and his head was tucked up in his coat. When she moved the coat to look at his face, she saw that he'd died crying. His face was twisted, and the tears were frozen on his cheeks. She said it was painfully obvious that the kid was terrified when he succumbed to hypothermia, and as a mother, it broke her heart. She told me, repeatedly, that she hopes the father is burning in hell as we speak. The other traumatic story she told me that stood out in my mind was one that happened when she was a rookie. Her team got a report of an experienced climber who hadn't come home the previous day. His wife was convinced that something bad had happened because he'd never failed to come home on time. They went out looking for him and had to climb what sounded like some very technically challenging parts of the mountain. They got to a relatively flat area, and KD started seeing blood in the snow. She followed the trail, and as she went, she started seeing little bits of tissue. She wasn't sure exactly what body part it had come from, but the farther she followed it, the more there was. She follows this blood and tissue trail to a sheltered area under a cliff face, and she finds the climber. She said there was so much blood, more than she'd ever seen before. He was lying face down, one arm stretched in front of him, as if he'd died crawling. She looks closer and sees that he's been partially disemboweled, which is where the tissue she'd seen had come from. The guy has an ice pick tucked into a hip holster, and it's covered in blood. Of course, they'll never be sure exactly what happened, but she said, as best she can figure, this is what went down. The guy had been attempting to climb up to the next area and had been using his ice axe to ascend. He'd probably hit a loose patch and had fallen. On the way down, or possibly when he landed, he'd gotten impaled by the axe, and it had disemboweled him. He drug himself along, tearing pieces of himself out as he went, and had died under the cliff face. She isn't terribly bothered by gore, but I guess a few of the guys who came to help her remove the body threw up when they turned him over, and a good portion of his intestines spilled out. I mentioned to her that I was interested in hearing about any experiences she had with people completely disappearing. Her eyes light up, and she leans in close to me. "Want to hear a real doozy?" she asks. She tells me about how, when she first started, there was a case that got a lot of attention in the media. A family had been out berry picking in an area of the forest very close to the entrance of the park. They had 2 little boys, both under the age of 5, and at some point during the day, one of them vanishes. There's an absolutely massive search, and they find absolutely nothing. It's another of those cases where it's like, the kid was never there in the first place. The dogs just sit down and don't pick up on anything. No trace of the kid is found. The search goes on for about 2 months, but is eventually called off. Fast forward to 6 months later. The family comes back to place flowers at a memorial that's been set up there for the kid. They bring their other son. While they're placing the flowers, they lose sight of the kid for about 3 seconds, and in that span of time, he vanishes into thin air. Now, obviously, the parents are beyond devastated. It's awful enough to lose one child, but to lose 2 is beyond imagining. The search is huge, one of the largest in state history. There are about 300 volunteers combing every inch of this park, looking for the kid. But again, there's no trace of him. The search goes on for about a week, with people looking miles from the part of the park he vanished from. And then, almost 2 weeks later, a volunteer almost 15 miles from the designated search area radios in that he's found the kid. They assume that the kid was dead, but the volunteer says he's not only alive, he's in good shape. KD and her team go out to recover the kid, and when they get there, she can't believe that this is the kid that's been missing. His clothes are clean, there's no dirt on him anywhere, and he doesn't appear traumatized. The volunteer says he found the kid sitting on a log, playing with a little twig bundle that's bound together with some old rope. KD asks him where he's been, who he was with for those 2 weeks, and the kid tells her that he's been with the Fuzzy Man. Now, KD firmly believes in Bigfoot, so she gets all excited and asks what he means by fuzzy. Was he hairy? But the kid says no, he wasn't hairy. He was a fuzzy man, and he describes a man that's blurry, like when you close your eyes but not all the way closed. He says the man came out of the trees and took the kid with him deep into the woods. The kid says he slept in a hollow tree, and the fuzzy man gave him berries to eat. KD asks if the man was mean, if he scared the kid, and the kid says no, he wasn't scary, but I didn't like how he didn't have eyes. KD says they get the kid back to headquarters, and a cop takes him into town to talk to him more about what happened. She's friends with the cop that talked to him, and she said the kid described being kept in this tree by the fuzzy man and given berries whenever he was hungry. He was allowed to wander around a very specific clearing, but when he tried to go further, the fuzzy man would get mad and yell real loud, even though he didn't have a mouth. When the kid got scared at night, the fuzzy man made it go brighter and gave him the twig bundle. He said the fuzzy man was going to keep him, but he had to let him go because the kid wasn't the right kind. He either can't or won't elaborate more on that. The cops are just sort of left scratching their heads, and the search for his brother is renewed with no results. The kid has no idea where his brother might be, and they never find him. The last story that KD told me was of something that happened to her when she got separated from her training group when she was a rookie. They were learning the basics of high-elevation belaying on a well-mapped side of the mountain, and she had to use the bathroom. She went off about 50 yards from the group during a meal break and did her business. I'll tell the rest exactly as she told it to me. So I go to take a piss, and once I'm done, I start going back to the group. But I've only gotten about 5 feet when I realize that I have no idea where I am. And this wasn't a, oh, I got turned around, lost. I mean, I had literally no fucking clue where I was. If you'd asked me, I don't even think I'd have been able to tell you what state we were in. It was sort of how I imagine people with amnesia feel, you know? You're completely lost and you have no idea what to do. So I stood there for a while, just trying to figure out where the fuck I was and what I was supposed to do. But the longer I stand there, the more confused and turned around I get, so I started walking. As I recall, I just picked a random direction and went for it. And as I'm walking, it's just getting worse and worse to the point where I have no concept of why I'm on the mountain in the first place. I'm just trudging through the snow, and then I start hearing this voice. It's kind of inside my head almost, like if a frog could talk, all low and croaky. And it's telling me over and over, it's okay, you just need to find something to eat. Find something to eat and you'll be okay, just keep walking and find something to eat. Eat. So I start looking around for anything that I can eat, and I swear to God I've never felt that hungry in my whole life. It was bottomless, and I think I'd have eaten just about anything you put in front of me right then. I had no concept of time, so I had no idea how long I'd been out when I hear an actual voice coming toward me. I go toward it and see one of the other SARs, and he looks fucking terrified. He's running toward me asking if I'm okay and what the hell I'm doing out here. And the scary thing was, as he's running toward me, I kind of see myself reaching into my belt for my hunting knife. I'm not even really thinking about what I'm doing, but what I am thinking is that I have to eat. If I don't eat, I'll never be okay again, so I just have to eat. He sees me doing that, and he backs off right away. He yells at me to put my knife away, that he's not going to hurt me, and that kind of snaps me back. All of a sudden, I know exactly where I am, and I put the knife away. I run to him and ask him how long I've been gone, thinking he'll tell me I've been gone for half an hour or so. But he tells me I've been gone for 2 fucking days. I've gone over 2 peaks and ended up almost on the other side of the mountain, and if I'd kept going, I would have ended up wandering into about 300 miles of wilderness. They'd never have found me. He can't believe I'm not dead, and of course, I don't know what the fuck to think. To me, no time has passed at all. I don't say anything, I just go back with him to a rendezvous point, and I'm taken back to HQ to be airlifted to the hospital. When I get there, they do all kinds of tests and try to figure out what happened. As best they can guess, I had some kind of weird fugue state, which is kind of like amnesia, or a weird seizure that knocked my brain out of whack. But the truth is that we really don't know. It's never happened again, but I'll tell you, ever since then I never go out there alone. People rag on me for making them come with me when I have to leave the group, but I just tell them that listening to me piss in the snow is better than losing me for 2 fucking days on a freezing mountain. EW. The next person I talked to was EW, a former trainer who now works as an EMT. He still comes to ops like this to help out, but doesn't work full-time for us anymore. He specialized in finding lost kids. He just seemed to have a sixth sense when it came to knowing where they'd gone. He's a legend among the more senior vets, but he gets embarrassed if you compliment him on his work. He sat down with me at dinner one evening, and we ended up swapping stories. Most of them were just casual. But when we got on the subject of our weirder calls, I mentioned that I'd had a buddy who'd gone up a set of stairs. He got kind of quiet and asked me if I'd heard of a little boy who'd disappeared from his park a few years back. I hadn't, so he told me this story. Cause of death as something like massive internal bleeding, but no one knows what really happened. I've never been able to forget that kid. I have nightmares about it sometimes. I don't let my kids go into the woods alone, and when we go together, I never let them out of my sight. I used to love it out here, but that case and a couple others just sort of ruined it for me. Dinner was over, so we started to clean up and go back to our cabins. Before we went our separate ways, he put his hand on my shoulder and looked at me really close. He tells me that there's bad things out here, things that don't care if we have families or lives, or that we can think and feel. He tells me to be careful, and he walks away. I didn't have a chance to talk with him again, but that story stuck with me. PB. By pure coincidence, I got to talk to another vet, PB, who's been in the SAR field for years. We were partnered on a grid sweep during a training exercise, and we were chatting casually about how we liked the job, what kinds of things we'd seen, and the like. At one point, we passed an old set of stairs, though these were probably from an old fire lookout given the area that we were in. I sort of casually mentioned that I was curious about the stairs and that I wished I knew more about them. He got kind of quiet and looked like he wanted to tell me something, but wasn't sure if he should. Finally, he told me to turn my radio off. Obviously, this is something we are never ever supposed to do, but I did it, and he did the same. The sun came up. He said he was sick. None of us have heard from him since he left.
They should have never confiscated my son's Tamagotchi. Until 3 weeks ago, I was living what most would consider a simple and happy life. I'm a stay-at-home dad, probably on Reddit, more than I care to admit. I met my wife, Noriko, or Nori for short, in Osaka, Japan, 12 years ago, during a work trip for an advertising agency. Shortly after we started dating, Nori was offered a senior position at her company's newly opened NYC branch. At the time, I was living in Connecticut, but working remotely, so it was an easy decision to move in together in NYC. Plus, her mother has lived in Queens for the past 30 years, so it just made sense. 3 years later, we got married. The following spring, we had our son, Nicholas. Again, I'd like to emphasize that we've lived what I call a pretty normal life. We've had our ups and downs, but have never experienced anything quite like what I'm about to share. 3 weeks ago, Nicholas pulled this little gizmo out of his backpack. At first glance, it reminded me of a Tamagotchi, a little piece of plastic that easily could fit in your pocket, 3 or 4 little buttons on the bottom, and a cheap display up top. However, the design wasn't colorful, like I remember Tamagotchis being. It was obsidian black. From a distance, you could easily mistake it for some kind of medical device. And even stranger, I never could actually see any pet on the display. Either way, Nori and I hadn't any clue where he got it from. We presume a friend at school must have gifted it to him. He called it his tether pet, and was nothing short of obsessed with it. I mean, I could understand. I remember getting a Tamagotchi for Christmas when I was his age. It felt like you were responsible for some other life form. Your relationship with the toy often felt like a life or death situation. Nikki was certainly under a similar spell. So that same Sunday, we piled into Nori's Corolla and took the BQ Expressway to Mount Sinai Hospital in Queens to visit her mom, Aki, who's suffering from bone cancer. Nikki was in the back seat, attending to his tether pet. "How's your Tamagotchi, buddy?" "What?" "Your little pet there." Nikki is normally eager to yap Nori and I's ear off about whatever his fascination of the day is. but for whatever reason, his tone was flat and serious when discussing his tether pet. Fine. Oh, yay. Do you have a name for him? It's a girl. Oh, cool. What's her name? Baba. It came with the name. I didn't get to pick it. Nori tried to play along. Baba. That's cute. Not really. She's always hungry, and whenever she poops, I have to clean it up. I let out a laugh. Reminds me of somebody I used to know. No, Dad. It's a lot of responsibility. You wouldn't understand. Nori and I laughed. Oh, the simple joys of parenthood. We arrived at Aki's room, only to be held back by a couple of nurses. They asked us to wait while Grandma's bedpan was changed. It saddened me to think about how Aki had wilted over the past year. It didn't seem long ago she was in our living room, bouncing Nikki on her knee, singing that silly, old, horse racing anthem. Bum da da, bum da da, bum bum bum. Bum da da, bum da da, bum bum bum. Nikki loved that. He'd blow up in a fit of laughter every time. Now she couldn't even get out of her hospital bed. It crushed me, but I guess it had happened to me someday too. Before I could get too melancholy, a nurse opened the door with a smile. She's ready to see you now. We stepped inside, and there was Aki, still glowing, albeit dimly, with her usual tender smile. Nikki seemed to snap out of his fog, with her in sight, running to her bedside. Grandma! Aki tried to roll over and muster a hug for his reception, but it was clearly too much for her. Nori and I followed close behind. This had become a very difficult ritual for Nori to get used to. Aki told us about how her treatment had been going, how she was always in pain, but that there was still a chance she could get through it. I don't know why, but I never had any real faith that she would. I guess I've just seen this scenario play out one too many times. In my experience, at least, it never ended how we all prayed each night that it would. After some more light conversation and updates on work, school, etc., Nikki pulled out his tether pet. Oh, how are you liking the new toy Grandma gave you? Nori and I looked at each other flabbergasted. Aki gave it to him. She could barely get out of bed, let alone go buy Nikki a toy from the store. Aki, where did you get that toy from? I asked. Oh, I think one of the doctors gave it to me. Yes, it's something they're giving to a lot of the patients around here. It didn't make any sense, but before I could ask him more questions, a nurse came in and told us our time was up and that Aki needed to get some rest. Nori and I had a couple conversations, theorizing about why the hospital would have given her the toy. Maybe it was some charity connected to the hospital. Either way, we had more important things to worry about. So as the days went on, we let it go. Everything in our lives continued as normal until the day Nikki lost his tether pet. It was last week, Friday. We were just sitting down for dinner when Nikki comes shuffling into the room, looking on the verge of tears. I can't find my tether pet. Nori was setting the table. She had really went all out for us that evening. Okay, well, after dinner, we can all take a look together to find it. Observing my son more closely, he wasn't just upset. He looked devastated. You don't understand, Mom. She could die if I don't. At this point, I decided it was time to do some fathering. I took a knee. Listen, Nicholas, I understand your toy is important to you, but it's just that right, a toy. So let's sit down and eat the dinner Mama made us, and we can take a look after, okay? I gave him that stern but tender look a father gives to ensure his way. Nikki nodded solemnly. I gave him a hug and a rub on the back. All throughout dinner, Nikki avoided our usual conversation starters. How was school? How was soccer practice? What do you want to do this weekend? Etc. It was clear his mind was racing. It really rubbed me the wrong way. I don't remember ever being this stressed about my Tamagotchi. Just then, Nori's phone rang. She moved to the edge of kitchen to take the call. I watched as her face slowly settled into a more serious expression as she listened to the other end. She responded with simple, short acknowledgments of what she was hearing as she walked over to the living room. She hung up and began to put on her coat. "Everything okay, honey?" I mouthed to her silently. "Aki." She nodded. "I think it should be fine, but if it becomes serious, I'll call you." "Sounds good." I looked to Nikki and provided a distraction. "Shall we look for Baba?" Nikki nodded his head frantically, clearly unwilling to wait an even second longer. We looked around the house for quite some time. He was certain he had come home with it, so I was pretty determined to help him find it. It really felt like looking for a needle in a haystack, though. It wasn't until we were just about to give up that we found it, fallen beneath the shoe rack near his backpack. I thought for sure we'd have some small celebration of our efforts, but Nicky didn't even smile. He just picked it up and began to shake his head. "Ah, man. What is it, buddy?" "Just a lot of buildup." "Oh, of what?" "Poop." I laughed. "It's not funny, Dad. She could have suffocated." "From the poop?" I laughed even harder. I've always had a stupid sense of humor. Nicky, presumably offended by my not taking this seriously, retreated up to his room. Alone, I decided this would be good a time as any to pop on an old samurai movie for my own selfish pleasures. Plus a 3-hour runtime would keep me up long enough in case Nori called. But about halfway into the movie, she came in the door, sopping, wet. I guess it had started raining. She explained that everything ended up okay, a false alarm. I cut the movie short, and we went to bed. As we laid together under the sheets, it was becoming clear she couldn't fall asleep. "What's wrong, babe?" "When I got to Sinai today, Mom had an accident." "Oh, like she shit herself." I wasn't sure how to respond, but luckily she continued. "What if we get so old or sick that some stranger has to literally wipe our ass?" I chuckled. "I mean, we probably will." She rolled over and looked at me with playful concern. "I don't want a stranger to wipe my ass." "So you're saying it has to be me?" She finally broke into a giggle. "Well, how about we just promise to take care of each other?" Then I kissed her on the cheek. Deal. The next few days were normal. Well, the new normal. Nicky seemingly had lost all interest in having friends over, with his ongoing tether pet responsibilities. In fact, we even got an email from his soccer coach that he was absent-mindedly monitoring his device while on the sidelines. We used to get emails that he needed to stop hogging the ball so much. One evening, as we put him to bed, we explained that if his pet continued to affect his school participation, that we'd have no choice but to confiscate it from him. He appeared gravely disturbed by this notion. "That'd make you a murderer." It was such an absurd thing to say, but he said it with such conviction, a conviction that I don't believe an 8-year-old should be able to feel. I'd soon understand why. Yesterday, around noon, Nicky's at school, Nori's at work. I get a call from the principal. "Everything's fine. We just wanted to let you know that we needed to confiscate a toy from your son today, as it was distracting him from classwork." No parent ever enjoys these calls. I apologize. We've talked to him about this before. We'll have another chat about it tonight and make sure he gets the message. Would you like us to hold on to it for now, or send him home with it? God, I wish I could go back in time. Hold on to it. I knew Nikki would be furious, but as a father, I assumed this was a good opportunity for some tough love. Sure enough, when Nikki got home, he was in a panic. Dad, they took my tether puppet away. She's gonna die, Dad. She's gonna die. I got on one knee and gave him my look. Even if it dies, it'll be okay, because it's just a toy, right? You can always just start over. He started crying, as though really accepting the fact that this could really be the end for his pet. It's not just a toy, Dad. It feels real. It is real. Right then, it all clicked. Nikki wasn't grieving a toy. He was grieving his grandma. I felt a wave of relief, now seemingly able to connect the dots that didn't align to me before. I decided to make this a teaching moment. Nicholas, death is hard. We're all facing that with Grandma right now, right? Nikki nodded knowingly. But it's a natural part of life. It's not wrong or bad. It's okay. It can feel sad to let somebody go, but everything really will be okay. Really? Come here, pal. I pulled him in for a hug. Death is what makes life special. It's what makes each moment count. It's a good thing. Snot was running down Nikki's nose, onto my shoulder. But I don't want Baba to die. I know. Just then, my phone began to ring. It was Nori. Hey, Han, what's up? The hospital just called me. I think it's happening. My heart stopped. I let go of Nikki. He stepped back, feeling my mood shift. What did they say? She's refused to eat or drink all day, including her medications. Then she had a seizure, and has only been getting worse since then. Where's Nikki? Why did this feel familiar? This sensation. It was like deja vu. I could feel myself freezing up. Nikki tapped my knee. Daddy, what's wrong? I blurted out. Honey, what was that name you called Mom as a baby? Nori seemed frustrated that I had ignored her question. Gaba or Baba, I think. Babe, you and Nikki need to meet me at Mount Sinai. A jolt of fear struck down my spine. All of a sudden, my mind felt like it was racing ahead of me. My mother-in-law's mortality, being connected to a toy, was quite the leap, I know. But in that moment, it truly felt crystal clear. How could this happen? It felt like the most basic rules of reality were simply torn out from under me. I had to move. Fast. We're on our way. A wall of obsidian clouds lay heavy above our neighborhood. Nikki and I piled into the car. Daddy, where are we going? We're going to see Grandma. But we'd take a quick detour first. Nikki looked afraid. Is Grandma gonna die? Daddy? I couldn't respond. What could I even say at that point? I'm supposed to be the voice of reason, but I felt like I was losing it. In fact, it had started raining, and it took me 6 blocks to realize I didn't have my wipers on. We pulled up to the school entrance. Nikki, wait here. I leaped out of the car before Nikki could question my actions. I ran up to the glass double doors, pounding my fists in the rain. Hey, is there anybody in there? Nothing. I ran around the building towards the gymnasium. Locked. I was really starting to feel hopeless. I noticed a window, slightly ajar on the 2nd story of the building. I tried scaling the wall, but the downpour made it impossible. Fuck, this was so stupid. It occurred to me that this really could just be a crazy coincidence, that my mother-in-law was dying right now, and I was here in the rain, trying to break into an elementary school. But then I noticed a tetherball stand, held down by a weighted tire. I ran over to it, flipped it on its side, and with all my might pushed it toward the base of where the window was. I got a good grip on it and started to climb. If I could balance on the top, I should just be able to reach the windowsill. The rain made my hands slippery, but I just focused on Aki, on Baba. I felt a bellow of thunder rumble through the sky and knew my time was running out. Just as I reached the top, I heard, "Daddy, Daddy." Nikki was standing at the base of the tetherball pole, clearly scared, drenched in the rain. I called out to him, "Wait right there. I'll be back." Bam! A crack of blinding white light, and then total black. I don't remember anything after that. Just some vague limbo of nothing. I woke up, laid up in a hospital bed. My body was aching all over, craning my neck around. I pieced together that I was in Mount Sinai Hospital in Queens. I had no idea how much time had passed. Nori and Nikki entered the room shortly after. My mind began to fill up with questions, but I was too weak to get them out. I just laid there in a daze. Nori started crying. Nikki stood like a statue, just staring at the floor. I felt like Lazarus, back from the dead. The first question I managed to ask was if Aki was still with us. She wasn't. A nurse joined us and explained to me that I had been struck by lightning on that tetherball pole. They'd need to run some additional testing that evening. My family doesn't know yet, but I am now suffering from electrical cardiomyopathy, aka my heart is fucked. As I write this, Nori and Nikki are asleep under the roof of our humble home, but I'm still here. I have no idea when I'll get out. And the more I look into my condition, the more I wonder if I even will. But this isn't the reason I'm sharing any of this is now. It's because of what just happened to me. Only a couple hours ago now, a man came into my room while I was sleeping, unannounced. He looked like a doctor, but didn't state himself as one. Simply, he placed his hand over mine. "Give it to someone you trust." Then he left. I could feel a soft, plastic object left behind in my palm, but it was too dark to see, when suddenly a little display lit up. 8-bit text floated across the bright screen. FAFA. The text faded, leaving only my own bloodshot eyes, gazing back at myself. Nicholas used to call me that. I feel so lost right now. I feel so hopeless. I don't know what any of this means, or what I am supposed to do. If anyone has gone through something like this, or knows someone who has, please tell me. I feel so alone. I don't want to die. I love you, Nori. I love you, Nicholas.